In the shadow-haunted halls of Ravenwood Manor, a brutal murder shatters a snowbound night. Hercule Poirot, the brilliant detective, unravels a web of greed, betrayal, and long-buried secrets. As Lady Clara's chilling confession exposes her as the killer, a cryptic journal and a mysterious locket reveal a deeper conspiracy, a hidden debt, a priceless relic, and a vengeful watcher stalking the estate. With time running out, Poirot's little gray cells race to uncover the truth before the manor's dark legacy claims another victim. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ravenwood Manor. The winter wind howled across the English countryside, carrying with it a chill that seemed to whisper of secrets and foreboding. Hercule Poirot, seated in the warmth of his London apartment, adjusted his pristine silk tie and gazed at the letter in his hand. The envelope, embossed with the crest of the Langston family, had arrived that morning, its contents urgent and intriguing. Sir Reginald Langston, a man of wealth and influence, had requested Poirot's immediate presence at Ravenwood Manor, a sprawling estate nestled in the remote hills of Yorkshire. The letter spoke of cryptic threats, a sense of impending doom, and a plea for the renowned detective's unparalleled intellect to avert disaster. Poirot's mustache twitched as he read the final lines. Monsieur Poirot, I fear my life is in danger. I trust no one, yet I place my faith in your little gray cells. Come at once. The signature was bold, almost defiant, as if Sir Reginald had penned it with the weight of his own mortality pressing upon him. Poirot folded the letter with precision, his mind already turning over the possibilities. A case such as this, with its undercurrent of dread, was precisely the sort of challenge that stirred his curiosity. He glanced at the clock on the mantelpiece. It was 3:30 in the afternoon, and the train to Yorkshire departed in an hour. With a nod to himself, Poirot rose, his small, neat frame moving with purpose. He donned his overcoat, selected a walking stick with a silver handle, and instructed his valet to pack a small case for an overnight stay. The game is afoot, mon ami, he murmured, though there was no one to hear him. The phrase, borrowed from his friend Hastings' fondness for Sherlock Holmes, felt oddly fitting. The journey to Yorkshire was a study in contrasts. The train rattled through London's smoky outskirts, then gave way to the rolling green hills and stark moors of the north. Poirot, seated in a first-class compartment, sipped a tisane and reviewed the few details he knew of Sir Reginald Langston. An industrialist of considerable means, Langston had built his fortune in steel and shipping, but rumors of ruthless business dealings and strained family ties had reached even Poirot's ears. The man was said to be imperious, a patriarch who ruled his household with an iron hand. Who then would dare threaten such a figure? And why summon a detective from London rather than rely on local authorities? As the train neared its destination, the sky darkened, heavy with the promise of snow. Poirot disembarked at a small windswept station, where a chauffeur in a black Rolls-Royce awaited him. The man, broad-shouldered and taciturn, introduced himself as Mr. Collins, the butler of Ravenwood Manor. His face was lined, his eyes guarded, and Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hand as he held open the car door. Sir Reginald is expecting you, sir, Collins said, his voice clipped. The weather is turning. We must hurry. The drive to Ravenwood Manor wound through narrow lanes, the hedgerows bowing under the weight of the gathering storm. Poirot observed the landscape with a detached curiosity, his mind already constructing a mental map of the case. The manor itself appeared suddenly, a Gothic edifice of gray stone looming against the bruised sky. Its towers and turrets gave it the air of a fortress, impregnable yet oppressive. As the car crunched to a halt on the gravel drive, Poirot felt a prickle of anticipation. This was no ordinary house call. Collins led him through a heavy oak door into a grand entrance hall, where a chandelier cast flickering shadows across marble floors. A maid took Poirot's coat, and he was ushered into a drawing room warmed by a roaring fire. There, Sir Reginald Langston awaited him, a man whose presence filled the room despite his advanced years. Tall and broad, with a mane of white hair and piercing blue eyes, Sir Reginald exuded authority. Yet Poirot noted there was a tension in his posture, a flicker of unease in his gaze. "Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald said, rising from a leather armchair, "I am grateful you came so quickly. I fear I have little time." His voice was deep, resonant, but there was a crack in its confidence, like a fault line in stone. Poirot inclined his head. "I am at your service, Sir Reginald. Pray, tell me of these threats." Sir Reginald gestured to a chair, and Poirot sat, his hands folded neatly in his lap. The industrialist produced a small bundle of letters, each written in a jagged, unfamiliar hand. "These began arriving a month ago," he said. "They speak of betrayal, of debts unpaid, of justice. The last one arrived yesterday, promising my death within days." He passed the letters to Poirot, who examined them with care. The paper was cheap, the ink smudged, but the words were deliberate, venomous. "Your time is near, Langston. No one escapes their sins." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And you suspect someone in particular?" Sir Reginald hesitated, his gaze drifting to the fire. "I have enemies, Monsieur Poirot, in business, in family. My wife Clara has her ambitions. My son Rupert is a wastrel who resents my control. My daughter Elise hides her thoughts behind her art. And then there is Harold Grayson, my business partner, who believes I have cheated him. Even Dr. Evelyn Ward, a guest here, has her secrets. I trust none of them." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging each name. "And your household staff?" "Collins has been with me for years, but loyalty can be bought. The maids, the cook, they see and hear much. I cannot be certain of anyone." Before Poirot could press further, the door opened, and a woman entered, her presence commanding attention. Lady Clara Langston was younger than her husband, her beauty sharp and cold, like a diamond. Her black dress rustled as she moved, and her eyes, a pale gray, assessed Poirot with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "Reginald, you did not tell me we had a guest," she said, her tone smooth but edged. "This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot," Sir Reginald said. "I have engaged his services." Lady Clara's lips tightened. "A detective? Surely this is unnecessary." Poirot smiled, a small, polite gesture. "Madame, it is often the unnecessary that proves essential." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the other household members. Rupert Langston, a young man with disheveled hair and bloodshot eyes, slouched into the room, a glass of whiskey in hand. Elise Langston followed, her delicate frame almost lost in a shapeless sweater, her eyes downcast. Harold Grayson, a wiry man with a pinched face, entered next, his handshake firm but his smile forced. Dr. Evelyn Ward, the final guest, was a woman of middle years, her auburn hair pulled back severely, her manner reserved yet watchful. "Dinner" was announced, and the group moved to the dining room, where a long mahogany table gleamed under candlelight. Poirot observed the dynamics with keen interest. Rupert drank heavily, ignoring his father's disapproving glances. Elise picked at her food, her fingers stained with paint. Lady Clara spoke of trivialities, her voice a mask for something deeper. Grayson and Dr. Ward exchanged brief, guarded looks as if sharing a secret. Collins, overseeing the service, moved with the precision of a soldier, but Poirot noted his eyes lingered on Lady Clara. As the meal progressed, the storm outside intensified, rattling the windows. Sir Reginald, seated at the head of the table, seemed distracted, his fork pausing mid-air. Poirot, ever alert, sensed the undercurrents of tension. He asked innocuous questions about the manor's history, the family's business, the guests' professions, each designed to probe without alarming. Dr. Ward, he learned, was a chemist researching rare toxins. Grayson spoke of a recent business deal gone sour. Elise mentioned a painting she was working on, a portrait of her father, though her tone was flat. The evening wore on, and Poirot excused himself to inspect the manor's layout. Collins guided him through the labyrinthine halls, pointing out the library, the conservatory, and Sir Reginald's study, a fortress-like room with heavy curtains and a single locked window. Poirot noted the lock's complexity and the absence of any signs of tampering. "A secure room, Monsieur Collins," he remarked. Yes, sir, Collins replied, his voice neutral. Sir Reginald values his privacy. As they returned to the drawing room, a piercing scream shattered the silence. The maid, a young woman named Mary, stood trembling in the doorway, her face pale. Sir Reginald, she gasped. He's in the study. He's not moving. Poirot, followed by the others, hurried to the study. The door was locked, but Collins produced a key. Inside, Sir Reginald lay slumped over his desk, a glass of brandy spilled beside him. His face was contorted, his eyes wide with shock. Poirot knelt beside the body, his fingers probing gently. No pulse. The smell of almonds lingered faintly in the air, a hallmark of cyanide, though subtler, suggesting a rare variant. He is dead, Poirot announced, his voice calm but grave. The room erupted in gasps and cries. Lady Clara clutched her throat. Rupert swore under his breath, and Elise sank into a chair, her eyes blank. Grayson and Dr. Ward stood apart, their expressions unreadable. Collins, ever stoic, closed the door. To preserve the scene, Poirot's mind raced. The locked room, the absence of footprints in the snow outside, the faint chemical scent, all pointed to a calculated act. He turned to the group, his gaze steady. Mes amis, we are in the presence of murder. No one leaves this manor until I have uncovered the truth. The clock struck 10, marking the start of Poirot's 24-hour challenge. He began his examination, noting the position of the body, the spilled brandy, and a pocket watch on the desk, its hands frozen at 11:07 p.m. Yet, the warmth of Sir Reginald's body suggested death had occurred. Chapter 2. The first victim, the air in Ravenwood Manor, was thick with the scent of polished wood and wax. But now, as Hercule Poirot stood in the doorway of Sir Reginald Langston's study, a new odor intruded, a faint, acrid hint of almonds, subtle yet unmistakable. The grand study, with its towering bookshelves and heavy velvet curtains, seemed to hold its breath, as if the room itself were complicit in the tragedy that had unfolded. Sir Reginald lay slumped across his mahogany desk, his white hair disheveled, his face frozen in a grimace of shock and pain. The glass of brandy beside him had spilled, its amber contents pooling on the polished surface, catching the flicker of the firelight from the hearth. Poirot's small, precise figure moved with deliberate calm as he crossed the threshold, his patent leather shoes silent on the thick Persian rug. The others crowded behind him. Lady Clara, her hands clasped tightly, her gray eyes wide with what might have been grief or fear. Rupert, swaying slightly, his whiskey glass still clutched in one hand. Elise, pale and trembling, her paint-stained fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. Harold Grayson, his pinched face taut with tension. Dr. Evelyn Ward, her auburn hair glinting as she stood apart, her expression unreadable. And Collins, the butler, whose stoic demeanor faltered for a moment as he gazed at his master's body. The maid, Mary, hovered near the door, her earlier scream now reduced to stifled sobs. Monsieur Poirot, Lady Clara said, her voice sharp despite its tremor. What has happened to my husband? Poirot raised a hand, a gesture both commanding and reassuring. Madame, we must proceed with order. No one is to touch anything. This is a scene of crime, and Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth. He knelt beside the body, his gloved fingers probing gently at Sir Reginald's wrist. No pulse as expected. The skin was still warm, suggesting death had occurred within the hour. Yet the pocket watch on the desk, its hands stopped at 11:07 p.m., told a different story. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching slightly as his mind seized upon the discrepancy. The clock on the mantelpiece ticking steadily showed 10:15 p.m. A staged clue, perhaps? The little gray cells, as Poirot liked to call them, began to hum with activity. He rose, his gaze sweeping the room. The study was a fortress within the manor, its single window locked from the inside, its heavy oak door secured with a complex mechanism that Collins had unlocked moments ago. No footprints marred the snow outside the window, visible through a gap in the curtains, confirming that no one had entered or exited that way. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting long shadows across the bookshelves, which were lined with leather-bound volumes and curios. A brass sextant, a jade figurine, a silver cigarette case. A decanter of brandy sat on a sideboard, its stopper askew, and a single glass, now empty, lay on its side beside Sir Reginald. Poirot turned his attention to the body itself. Sir Reginald's blue eyes, once piercing, stared blankly, their intensity extinguished. His mouth was slightly open, his lips tinged faintly blue, a classic sign of cyanide poisoning, though the almond-like scent suggested a rarer variant, perhaps prussic acid or a derivative. Poirot leaned closer, noting a faint residue on the rim of the spilled glass. He produced a small vial from his pocket, carefully collecting a sample of the brandy for later analysis. His movements were precise, almost theatrical, yet his focus was absolute. "Collins," Poirot said, turning to the butler who stood rigidly by the door. "When did you last see Sir Reginald alive?" Collins cleared his throat, his hands clasped behind his back. "At 9:30, sir. I brought him his brandy, as was his custom after dinner. He was alone, working at his desk. He seemed agitated, but he said nothing of it." "And you locked the door when you left?" "Yes, sir. Sir Reginald insisted on it. He valued his privacy, especially in the evening." Poirot nodded, his eyes drifting to the lock. It was a sturdy mechanism requiring a key from both sides, and Collins had produced the only key from his pocket. A locked room, then, a puzzle that intrigued Poirot, for it suggested the killer was either among those present or had devised a method of extraordinary cunning. He turned to the others, who watched him with a mixture of fear and suspicion. "Mes amis," he said, his voice calm but firm, "this is no accident. Sir Reginald has been murdered, and the killer is likely among us. I ask that you remain in the drawing room while I conduct my initial examination. Monsieur Collins, ensure no one leaves the manor." Collins nodded, his face pale but composed. "Yes, sir." As the group filed out, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous hall, Poirot began his methodical inspection. He started with the desk, its surface cluttered with papers, a fountain pen, and an ink blotter. A letter, half written, lay beneath, Sir Reginald's hand, addressed to his solicitor. It spoke of revising his will, a detail that sent a ripple of excitement through Poirot's mind. He tucked the letter into his pocket, noting its incomplete state. No signature, no witnesses. The pocket watch drew his attention next. Its crystal face was cracked, the hands frozen at 11:07 p.m., yet the body's warmth and the mantel clock suggested death had occurred closer to 10 p.m. Poirot examined the watch closely, noting a faint scratch on its back, as if it had been forcibly opened. A deliberate act to mislead? He placed it in a handkerchief, preserving it for further study. The brandy decanter was his next focus. He sniffed it cautiously, detecting no trace of the almond-like odor present in the spilled glass. The poison, then, had been added to the glass itself, not the decanter. A precise act, requiring access to Sir Reginald's private space. Poirot's eyes flicked to the sideboard, where a small silver tray held a single key, the spare to the study, according to Collins. Its presence suggested the killer had not needed to force entry, further narrowing the possibilities. He moved to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtains. The snow outside was pristine, untouched by footprints or disturbances. The lock was intact, its bolts secure. No one had entered or exited this way, confirming his suspicion that the murder was an inside job. He turned back to the room, his gaze lingering on the fire. A few papers lay in the grate, partially burned, their edges curled and blackened. Using a poker, Poirot retrieved them, revealing fragments of a ledger, numbers, dates, and the name Grayson scrawled in Sir Reginald's hand. A business dispute, perhaps? Another piece of the puzzle? Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped behind him, his mind constructing a mental map of the crime. The locked room, the poisoned glass, the stopped watch, the burned papers, all pointed to a killer who was both bold and meticulous, someone who knew Sir Reginald's habits and had access to his private sanctum. But who? Lady Clara, with her cold ambition? Rupert drowning in debt? Elise hiding behind her art? Grayson, nursing a grudge? Dr. Ward with her knowledge of toxins? Or Collins, the loyal servant who saw too much? He left the study, locking the door behind him, and rejoined the others in the drawing room. The atmosphere was tense, the fire casting flickering shadows across their faces. Lady Clara sat ramrod straight, her eyes fixed on Poirot. Rupert slouched in an armchair, his glass refilled. Elise stared at the floor, her fingers twisting a paintbrush. Grayson paced near the window, his movements jerky, while Dr. Ward sat calmly, her hands folded in her lap. Collins stood by the door, his posture rigid. "Monsieur Poirot," Grayson said, breaking the silence. "Have you found anything?" Poirot smiled, a small enigmatic gesture. "I have found much, Monsieur Grayson, but the truth requires patience. Tell me, when did you last speak with Sir Reginald?" Grayson hesitated, his eyes darting to Dr. Ward. "After dinner. We discussed business in the library. He was preoccupied. And you, Mademoiselle Elise?" Poirot turned to the young woman, who flinched at his gaze. "I was in my studio," she said softly. "I didn't see Father after dinner." Poirot nodded, his eyes moving to each face, reading their expressions, their hesitations. He asked similar questions of the others, noting Lady Clara's clipped responses, Rupert's evasiveness, and Dr. Ward's calm precision. Collins, when questioned, confirmed he had been clearing the dining room, but his eyes flickered briefly to Lady Clara, a detail Poirot filed away. The clock struck 11, and Poirot announced his intention to continue his investigation through the night. "The snow has trapped us here," he said. "But it has also trapped the killer. I will find them before the dawn of tomorrow." As the group dispersed to their rooms, under Collins' watchful eye, Poirot returned to the study, his mind alive with possibilities. He sat at Sir Reginald's desk, the dead man's presence almost tangible in the silent room. The letters from the earlier meeting lay in his pocket, their venomous words echoing in his mind. "Your time is near, Langston. No one escapes their sins. Were they a genuine threat or a distraction? The poison, the watch, the locked room, all suggested a mind that thrived on deception." Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft creak outside the door. He rose, his senses alert, and opened it to find the hall empty. A draft, perhaps, or something more sinister. He locked the door, again, his resolve hardening. The killer was watching, testing him, but Hercule Poirot was no ordinary adversary. He would set a trap, but first he needed more pieces of the puzzle. The night stretched on, the manor creaking under the weight of the storm. Poirot moved through the halls, his small flashlight casting a narrow beam. He visited the library. Chapter 3. Suspects in the Shadows. The drawing room of Ravenwood Manor was a study in contrasts, its opulent furnishings bathed in the flickering glow of a dying fire, yet the air was heavy with suspicion and dread. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand fireplace, its marble mantelpiece adorned with a silver candelabra, his small, meticulous frame a stark silhouette against the ornate backdrop. The clock on the wall chimed 11:30, each note a reminder of the fleeting hours in his self-imposed 24-hour challenge to unmask Sir Reginald Langston's killer. The snowstorm outside raged on, sealing the manor in a cocoon of isolation, ensuring that the murderer remained among them, hidden in plain sight. Poirot's sharp eyes, like polished obsidian, surveyed the assembled group. They sat in a tense semicircle, their faces a gallery of unease, each betraying a private turmoil. Lady Clara Langston, her black mourning dress pristine, sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her pale gray eyes darting between Poirot and the others, as if measuring their thoughts. Rupert Langston, the wayward son, slouched in an armchair, his bloodshot eyes fixed on the whiskey glass he clutched, his fingers trembling slightly. Elise Langston, delicate and withdrawn, sat near the window, her paint-stained hands twisting a handkerchief, her gaze lost in the swirling snow beyond the glass. Harold Grayson, Sir Reginald's business partner, stood by the bookcase, his wiry frame tense, his pinched face betraying a flicker of calculation. Dr. Evelyn Ward, the chemist, sat apart, her auburn hair pulled back severely, her expression calm but impenetrable, her hands resting lightly on the arms of her chair. Collins, the butler, stood by the door, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the room with the vigilance of a sentinel. Poirot cleared his throat, a soft sound that commanded immediate attention. "Mes amis," he began, his voice measured with the faintest trace of his Belgian accent. "We are gathered here under the shadow of a great tragedy. Sir Reginald Langston has been murdered, and the hand that struck him is in this room. Hercule Poirot will uncover the truth, but I require your cooperation. I will speak with each of you one by one to understand the events of this evening." A murmur rippled through the group, a mix of indignation and fear. Lady Clara's lips tightened. "This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. To suggest one of—" Sir Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Madame, it is not suggestion but fact. The study was locked, the window secure, the snow untouched. The killer did not come from outside. Now let us proceed with order and method." He began with Lady Clara, gesturing for her to join him in a corner of the room, near a velvet-upholstered settee. The others remained seated, their eyes following the pair, their whispers hushed but audible. Poirot sat, his posture impeccable, and invited Lady Clara to do the same. She complied, her movements graceful but guarded, her hands smoothing the folds of her dress. "Madame Langston," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "Tell me of your husband. What was his state of mind this evening?" Lady Clara's eyes flickered, a brief shadow crossing her face. "Reginald was preoccupied. He had been for weeks. These letters he mentioned, the threats, they weighed on him. He spoke little of it, but I could see the strain in his eyes. And your relationship with him? It was harmonious?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening on her lap. "No marriage is without its challenges, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald was a demanding man, set in his ways. We had our disagreements, but I loved him." Poirot nodded, his expression neutral but his mind cataloging her words, her pauses. "You were in your room after dinner, oui?" "Yes," she said quickly. "I retired early to read. I heard nothing until Mary's scream." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And you saw no one in the hall, no one near the study?" "No one," she said, her voice firm, but her eyes slid away from his, resting briefly on Collins before returning to the floor. Poirot dismissed her with a polite nod and called for Rupert next. The young man shuffled over, his movements sluggish, his breath carrying the sharp tang of whiskey. He dropped into the settee, his legs sprawled, his defiance barely masking his unease. "Monsieur Rupert," Poirot began, "your father mentioned debts. Gambling debts, perhaps?" Rupert's eyes narrowed, a flush creeping up his neck. "What's that got to do with anything? Yes, I've had some bad luck at the tables, but father always bailed me out. He didn't like it, but he paid. And tonight, where were you?" "Billiard room," Rupert said, his voice sullen. "Playing a few rounds by myself, trying to clear my head." "Alone?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his gaze was sharp. "Yeah, alone. You think I'd drag someone else into my misery?" Poirot made a mental note of the betting slip he had found in the billiard room, torn and singed. "And your father? Did you speak with him after dinner?" Rupert shook his head. "Didn't see him. He was holed up in that study as usual." Poirot dismissed him and turned to Elise, who approached with the hesitancy of a deer stepping into an open field. She sat, her hands clutching the handkerchief, her eyes wide and haunted. "Mademoiselle Elise," Poirot said softly, "you are an artist."
"Oui?"
"You were in your studio tonight?" She nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I was painting. A portrait of father. I wanted to capture him before." Her voice broke and she looked away. "Before?" Poirot prompted gently. "Before. He changed the will," she said, her words rushed. "He told me last week he was cutting me out, said I was too impractical, too lost in my art. I thought maybe the painting would change his mind." Poirot's eyes softened, but his mind was sharp. "And you heard nothing, Saw nothing until the scream. Nothing, she said, her voice trembling. I was alone. Next came Harold Grayson, who approached with a forced air of confidence, his handshake firm but his palms clammy. Monsieur Grayson, Poirot said, you and Sir Reginald were partners in business. Were there tensions? Grayson's smile was tight. Business is never without its challenges, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald was a hard negotiator. We had a disagreement recently over a shipping contract, but nothing serious. And tonight you were in the library with Dr. Ward? Yes, Grayson said quickly. Discussing some investments, we were there until we heard the scream. Poirot noted the speed of his response, the lack of hesitation. Too practiced, perhaps. He dismissed Grayson and called for Dr. Evelyn Ward. The chemist sat with a calm that bordered on detachment, her hands folded neatly, her eyes meeting Poirot's without flinching. Dr. Ward, Poirot said, you are a chemist, specializing in toxins, I understand. A curious coincidence given the nature of Sir Reginald's death. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. I study many substances, Monsieur Poirot, not just toxins. My work is for medical advancement, not murder. And tonight you were with Monsieur Grayson in the library? Yes, she said, her voice steady. We were discussing a potential collaboration. Nothing more. Poirot's eyes lingered, on her, noting the precision of her words, the absence of nervousness. And you knew nothing of the threat Sir Reginald received? Nothing, she said, her gaze unwavering. Finally, Poirot turned to Collins, who approached with the deference of a man accustomed to service. Monsieur Collins, Poirot said, you were the last to see Sir Reginald alive, oui? Yes, sir, Collins replied, his voice steady but his hands clasped tightly behind his back. I brought him his brandy at 9:30. He was at his desk writing. I locked the door as he instructed and returned to the kitchen. And you noticed nothing unusual? Collins hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing his face. He seemed tense, sir, more than usual. But he said nothing. Poirot dismissed him, his mind whirring. Each interview had revealed a piece of the puzzle, but the picture remained incomplete. Lady Clara's guarded glances, Rupert's evasiveness, Elise's fragility, Grayson's practiced responses, Dr. Ward's calm, Collins's hesitation, all were threads in a web of deception. He needed more. He returned to the center of the room, addressing the group. Mes amis, I have heard your accounts, but the truth is like a shadow. It moves when you approach. I will examine the matter further. No one is to leave their rooms until morning unless I summon them. Grayson protested, his voice sharp. This is absurd. You can't confine us like prisoners. Poirot's smile was serene but unyielding. Monsieur, until the killer is found, we are all prisoners of this storm, and of the truth. As the group dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, Poirot began his exploration of the manor. He moved through the corridors, his flashlight casting a narrow beam, his senses alert to every creak and shadow. In the billiard room he retrieved the torn betting slip, its edges singed, bearing Rupert's initials. In Elise's studio, the portrait of Sir Reginald stared back at him, its eyes almost accusing. In the library, the toxicology book remained open, a page marked with a note in Dr. Ward's precise hand. Each discovery added to his mental map, a constellation of clues pointing to a motive he could not yet see. He visited the kitchen where the maids were huddled, whispering. Mary, the one who had screamed, was pale but coherent. I saw nothing, sir, she said, her voice trembling. I was passing the study to fetch linens when I glanced through the keyhole. He was just lying there. Poirot nodded, noting the keyhole's angle. It offered a clear view of the desk, suggesting the killer had known Sir Reginald's habits intimately. He thanked her and moved on, his mind turning over the locked room, the poison, the watch. Chapter 4. The Clue of the Broken Watch. The silence of Ravenwood Manor was oppressive, broken only by the relentless howl of the snowstorm outside and the occasional creak of the ancient timbers settling under the weight of the cold. Hercule Poirot stood alone in Sir Reginald Langston's study, the scene of the crime, his small meticulous frame illuminated by the soft glow of a single oil lamp he had lit to supplement the flickering firelight. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked toward midnight, each second a reminder of the 24-hour deadline Poirot had set for himself to unmask a murderer. The air carried the faint, lingering scent of almonds, a ghostly trace of the poison that had claimed Sir Reginald's life. Poirot's sharp eyes, gleaming with purpose, were fixed on the desk where the body still lay, untouched as he had instructed, a tableau of death frozen in time. The study was a fortress of solitude, its heavy oak door locked, its single window bolted shut, the snow outside undisturbed. Sir Reginald lay slumped across the mahogany desk, his white hair disheveled, his blue eyes staring blankly, his lips tinged with the telltale blue of cyanide poisoning. Beside him, a spilled glass of brandy glistened in the lamplight, its contents staining the polished wood. But it was the pocket watch, its crystal face cracked, its hand stopped at 11:07 p.m., that held Poirot's attention. The discrepancy between the watch's time and the warmth of Sir Reginald's body, which suggested death closer to 10 p.m., was a puzzle that set Poirot's little gray cells ablaze. He approached the desk, his patent leather shoes silent on the Persian rug, and leaned closer to the watch. It was a fine piece, gold with intricate engravings, a family heirloom by its craftsmanship. The crack in the crystal was jagged, radiating from the center, as if struck with force. Poirot produced a small magnifying glass from his pocket, a tool he carried as faithfully as his walking stick, and examined the watch closely. The hands were indeed frozen at 11:07, but a faint scratch on the back of the case caught his eye. A deliberate mark, perhaps, made with a sharp tool. He turned the watch over, noting a tiny hinge that suggested it could be opened. With a delicate touch, he pried it open, revealing the intricate gears within. One gear was misaligned, as if tampered with to stop the mechanism at a specific time. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his mustache twitching. A clue most deliberate. The killer wishes to mislead Hercule Poirot, but they underestimate the power of observation. He placed the watch in a handkerchief, folding it carefully to preserve any fingerprints, though he suspected the killer had been too clever for such an obvious mistake. His gaze shifted to the spilled brandy glass, its rim bearing a faint residue. He retrieved the small vial he had used earlier, collecting another sample of the liquid. The almond-like scent was stronger here, confirming his suspicion of a rare cyanide variant, possibly prussic acid or a synthetic derivative. The decanter on the sideboard, however, showed no such odor, suggesting the poison had been added directly to the glass. A precise act, requiring intimate knowledge of Sir Reginald's habits. Poirot stepped back, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind constructing a mental map of the crime. The locked room, the stopped watch, the poisoned glass, all pointed to a killer who was both bold and cunning, someone within the manor's walls. But why stage the time of death? To create a false alibi? To confuse the timeline? The answer lay in the details, and Poirot was determined to uncover them. He moved to the fireplace where a few papers lay in the grate, their edges charred. Using a poker, he retrieved them, revealing fragments of a ledger, numbers, dates, and the name Grayson scrawled in Sir Reginald's bold hand. The entries hinted at a financial dispute, perhaps tied to the shipping contract Grayson had mentioned. Poirot tucked the fragments into his pocket, alongside the threatening letters Sir Reginald had shown him earlier. The letters, with their jagged script and venomous words, "Your time is near, Langston. No one escapes their sins," were another piece of the puzzle, but their authenticity was questionable. Were they a genuine threat, or a distraction crafted by the killer? The study's heavy curtains drew his attention next. He pushed them aside, revealing the bolted window. The snow outside was pristine, a white canvas untouched by footprints or disturbances. The lock was secure, its bolts rusted with age, confirming that no one had entered or exited this way. Yet the killer had gained access to the study, poisoned the brandy, and left without a trace. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he considered the spare key on the sideboard, which Collins had identified as the only other key to the study. Its presence suggested the killer had not needed to force entry, pointing to someone with intimate access, perhaps a member of the household. He returned to the desk, examining the papers scattered across its surface. A half-written letter to Sir Reginald's solicitor mentioned revising his will, naming Elise as the sole heir, a revelation that contradicted Sir Reginald's earlier claim of disinheriting her. The letter was unsigned, suggesting interruption or hesitation. Poirot folded it carefully, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. The will, the ledger, the watch, all were threads in a web of deception, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. Leaving the study, he locked the door behind him and moved through the silent corridors of the manor, his flashlight casting a narrow beam. The others were confined to their rooms as he had instructed, but the manor itself seemed alive, its shadows shifting with every gust of wind. He visited the billiard room where Rupert had claimed to be, and found the torn bedding slip again, its edges singed as if someone had tried to destroy it. The initials RL were scrawled on it, confirming its connection to Rupert's gambling debts. In Elise's studio, the portrait of Sir Reginald stared back at him, its eyes hauntingly, lifelike as if accusing someone of betrayal. In the library, the toxicology book remained open, a page marked with Dr. Ward's precise handwriting, detailing the properties of cyanide derivatives, a chilling coincidence. Poirot's exploration took him to the kitchen, where the maids were, still huddled, their whispers ceasing as he entered. Mary, the maid who had discovered the body, was pale but composed. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I swear I saw nothing but Sir Reginald through the keyhole. He was just lying there." Poirot nodded, his gaze softening. "You are certain you saw no one else in the hall?" "No." "One, sir?" she said, her eyes wide. "It was quiet except for the storm." He thanked her and moved on, his mind turning over the keyhole's vantage point. It offered a clear view of the desk, suggesting the killer had known exactly when Sir Reginald would drink the brandy. A planned act, executed with precision. As the clock struck 1 in the morning, Poirot returned to the drawing room where the fire had died to embers. He sat, his hands clasped, his eyes half closed, but his mind was a whirlwind of deduction. The broken watch was the key, a deliberate attempt to manipulate the timeline. But why 11:07? To align with someone's alibi? To suggest a later death, allowing the killer to be elsewhere? The suspects' accounts were too neat, too rehearsed, and Poirot sensed lies beneath their words. He rose, pacing the room, his small frame casting a long shadow. Lady Clara's guarded glances, Rupert's evasiveness, Elise's fragility, Grayson's practiced responses, Dr. Ward's calm, Collins's hesitation, all were pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. The threatening letters, the poisoned glass, the burned ledger, the stopped watch, each was a clue, but the motive remained elusive. Greed, revenge, betrayal. Poirot's mind raced, constructing scenarios, testing theories. A soft creak in the hall snapped him from his reverie. He moved to the door, his flashlight ready, but found only darkness. A draft, perhaps, or the killer watching from the shadows. He returned to his seat, his resolve hardening. The murderer was clever, but no one could outwit Hercule Poirot for long. The storm raged on, the manor a prison of snow and secrets. Poirot's 24-hour clock was ticking, with less than 21 hours remaining. He would set a trap, but first, he needed to understand the players. The broken watch was his first solid clue, a crack in the killer's carefully constructed facade, and Hercule Poirot would exploit it. Chapter 5. Tensions at the dinner table. The dining room of Ravenwood Manor gleamed with the elegance of a bygone era, its long mahogany table polished to a mirror-like sheen, reflecting the soft glow of a crystal chandelier overhead. The walls, adorned with portraits of stern-faced Langston ancestors, seemed to watch the assembled company with silent judgment. Hercule Poirot sat at one end of the table, his small, meticulous frame a stark contrast to the grandeur around him, his sharp eyes missing nothing. The clock on the mantelpiece showed 7:30 in the evening, mere hours before the tragedy that would soon unfold in Sir Reginald Langston's study. The snowstorm outside battered the tall windows, its howl a constant reminder of the manor's isolation, trapping guests and secrets alike within its stone walls. The dinner, served with precision by Collins the butler, was a lavish affair. A consommé of pheasant, roasted lamb with rosemary, and delicate potatoes au gratin, paired with a fine Bordeaux from Sir Reginald's cellar. Yet the atmosphere was anything but convivial. The air crackled with unspoken tensions, each guest a player in a drama Poirot was only beginning to unravel. He had arrived at Ravenwood Manor that afternoon, summoned by Sir Reginald's urgent letter about cryptic threats, and now, as he observed, the company, he sensed the undercurrents of motives that would soon culminate in murder. Sir Reginald sat at the head of the table, his commanding presence dominating the room. His white hair was swept back, his blue eyes piercing, though a shadow of unease lingered in their depths. He spoke little, his fork moving mechanically, his gaze drifting to the threatening letters Poirot had seen earlier, now tucked safely in the detective's pocket. Lady Clara Langston, seated to his right, maintained an air of icy composure, her black dress accentuating her sharp beauty. Her gray eyes flicked between her husband and the other guests, her lips curved in a smile that never reached her eyes. Rupert Langston, the dissolute son, slouched to her left, already on his second glass of wine, his tie loosened, his face flushed with a mix of defiance and resentment. Elise Langston, the artist's daughter, sat opposite him, her delicate frame hunched, her paint-stained fingers fidgeting with her napkin, her eyes avoiding her father's. Harold Grayson, Sir Reginald's business partner, sat stiffly, his wiry frame tense, his pinched face betraying a simmering anger. Dr. Evelyn Ward, the chemist, sat beside him, her auburn hair pulled back tightly, her calm demeanor a mask that Poirot found intriguing. Collins moved silently, refilling glasses and clearing plates, his stoic face revealing nothing, though Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hand as he poured wine for Lady Clara. Poirot, ever the observer, used the dinner to probe the dynamics of the household. He began with a seemingly innocuous remark. "Monsieur Langston," he said, his voice soft but clear, "this manor is most impressive. A family legacy, oui?" Sir Reginald nodded, his voice gruff. "Built by my great-grandfather. Every stone tells a story of ambition and sacrifice. But it's a heavy burden, Monsieur Poirot. Not everyone appreciates it." Rupert snorted, his glass pausing mid-air. "A burden you're happy to keep all to yourself, father. Never trusted me with an inch of it." Sir Reginald's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps if you showed more discipline, Rupert, I'd trust you with more than a monthly allowance." The words landed like a blow, and Rupert's face reddened. Lady Clara intervened, her tone smooth but sharp. "Reginald, must we air family matters in front of a guest?" Poirot smiled, a small, polite gesture. "Madame, I am here to understand, not to judge. Families, they are like tapestries, beautiful but woven with complex threads." Elise spoke up, her voice soft but trembling. "It's not just the manor, it's everything. Fathers always controlled everything." Her eyes flicked to Sir Reginald, then dropped to her plate. Poirot noted the exchange, his mind cataloging the resentment in Rupert's tone, the pain in Elise's eyes, and Lady Clara's quick deflection. He turned to Grayson. "And you, Monsieur Grayson, as Sir Reginald's partner, you share in this legacy, no?" Grayson's smile was tight, almost a grimace. "I handle the business side, Monsieur Poirot. Reginald's the visionary. We've had our differences, but we make it work." His words were measured, but his fingers tightened around his fork, betraying tension. Dr. Ward, silent until now, spoke in a calm, precise voice. "Business is like chemistry. volatile if not handled with care. Sir Reginald has a gift for it, but not without risks. Poirot's mustache twitched. A most interesting metaphor, Doctor. And your work? It involves such volatile substances? She met his gaze, unflinching. My research focuses on medical applications, Monsieur Poirot. Toxins, yes, but for healing, not harm. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, but Poirot steered it back with calculated precision. Mademoiselle Elise, he said, your art must be a refuge in such a demanding household. You paint your father, oui? Elise nodded, her voice barely audible. I'm working on his portrait. It's difficult. He's not an easy man to capture. Sir Reginald's expression softened briefly. Elise has talent, but she wastes it on dreams. I've tried to guide her, but she resists. The words stung, and Elise's hands trembled. Poirot noted the dynamic, Sir Reginald's control, Elise's quiet rebellion. He turned to Lady Clara. And you, madam, how do you find life here, so far from London society? Lady Clara's smile was brittle. Ravenwood is my home, Monsieur Poirot, but it can be isolating. I manage. Her words were polite, but Poirot sensed a deeper discontent. He pressed further, addressing the table. And these threats Sir Reginald mentioned, has anyone else received such letters? A heavy silence fell. Grayson shifted uncomfortably, Dr. Ward's eyes narrowed slightly, and Rupert drained his glass. Lady Clara spoke first. Reginald kept such matters private. He didn't share them with me. Nor me, Rupert muttered. Probably thought I'd sell the story to a bookmaker. Elise shook her head, her voice small. He never told me anything. Grayson cleared his throat. He mentioned something in passing, but I thought it was just business rivals stirring trouble. Dr. Ward remained silent, her expression unreadable. Collins, refilling the water glasses, paused briefly, his eyes meeting Poirot's for a fleeting moment before he resumed his duties. The dinner progressed, but the tension only grew. Poirot observed the subtle glances, Rupert's sullen glares at his father, Lady Clara's watchful eyes on Collins, Grayson's quick looks at Dr. Ward. Each interaction was a clue, a thread in the tapestry of motive and opportunity. He noted the way Sir Reginald gripped his wine-glass, his knuckles white as if bracing for an unseen blow. The threatening letters, with their jagged script and ominous words, loomed in Poirot's mind. Were they a genuine warning, or a ruse, to divert suspicion? As dessert was served, a delicate lemon tart, Sir Reginald excused himself, citing a need to review papers in his study. Monsieur Poirot, he said, his voice low, join me later. There's more I must tell you. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving the industrialist's face. I shall be there, monsieur. Sir Reginald's departure left a void at the table, and the conversation faltered. Lady Clara rose, signaling the end of the meal. I'm retiring for the evening, she said, her tone final. Monsieur Poirot, I trust you'll find whatever it is you're looking for. The others followed, dispersing to their rooms or the drawing room, leaving Poirot alone with his thoughts. He lingered in the dining room, his flashlight tracing the edges of the portraits, their eyes seeming to follow him. The manor was a labyrinth of secrets, and the dinner had revealed its fault lines: greed, resentment, ambition. He moved to the hall where Collins was clearing the last of the dishes. Monsieur Collins, Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. You served Sir Reginald's brandy tonight, oui? Yes, sir, Collins replied, his hand steady. Now. As always, I poured it from the decanter in his study. He was particular about it. And you noticed nothing unusual? Collins hesitated, a flicker of unease in his eyes. He seemed distracted, sir. More than usual, but I saw nothing out of the ordinary. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. He made his way to the study, intending to meet Sir Reginald, but as he approached, a piercing scream shattered the silence. It was Mary, the maid, standing in the hall, her face pale, her hands trembling. Sir Reginald, she gasped. He He's in the study. He's not moving. Poirot hurried to the study, the others converging behind him. Collins unlocked the door, revealing Sir Reginald slumped over his desk, a spilled glass of brandy beside him. His pocket watch stopped at 11:07 p.m. The faint scent of almonds confirmed Poirot's worst fears. Poison. The room was locked, the window secure, the snow untouched. The killer was among them. Poirot turned to the group, his voice calm but resolute. Mes amis, we are in the presence of murder. No one leaves this manor until I have uncovered the truth. The clock struck 8, marking the start of Poirot's 24-hour challenge. The tensions at the dinner table had set the stage, and now the game was truly afoot. Hercule Poirot would not rest until the killer was unmasked. Chapter 6. The Second Threat. The grand clock in Ravenwood Manor's entrance hall struck 9 o'clock, its deep chimes reverberating through the silent corridors, a somber reminder of the hours slipping away in Hercule Poirot's 24-hour quest to unmask a murderer. The snowstorm outside continued its relentless assault, cocooning the manor in a shroud of white, isolating its inhabitants from the world beyond. The air inside was thick with tension, the weight of Sir Reginald Langston's murder pressing heavily on the household. Poirot stood in the drawing room, his small, meticulous frame silhouetted against the flickering firelight, his sharp eyes scanning the ornate surroundings as he prepared to delve deeper into the web of secrets that entangled the manor's residents. Titao, discovery of Sir Reginald's body in the locked study, poisoned by a rare cyanide variant, had set the stage for a complex puzzle. The stopped pocket watch, the spilled brandy glass, the untouched snow outside, all pointed to a killer within the manor's walls, someone who knew Sir Reginald's habits intimately. Poirot had interviewed the suspects, Lady Clara, Rupert, Elise, Harold Grayson, Dr. Evelyn Ward, and Collins the butler, each revealing glimpses of motive and opportunity, yet none offering a clear path to the truth. Now as the night deepened, Poirot's little gray cells were alight with purpose, piecing together the clues while anticipating the killer's next move. He had returned to his assigned room on the second floor, a modest but elegant chamber with a 4-poster bed and heavy velvet curtains to review his notes. The threatening letter Sir Reginald had shown him. "Your time is near, Langston. No one escapes their sins," lay on the small writing desk, their jagged script a taunting challenge. Poirot was about to re-examine them when a soft rustle caught his attention. Slipped under the door was a single sheet of paper, its edges rough, its ink fresh. He retrieved it with care, his gloved fingers avoiding direct contact, and read the words scrawled in the same jagged hand as the earlier threats. "Leave, or you're next, Poirot." His mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "So the hunter becomes the hunted," he murmured. "The killer is bold, but careless. This is a mistake, mon ami." The note was a revelation, not for its threat, but for what it implied. The killer was watching, aware of Poirot's presence and his investigation. This suggested a confidence bordering on arrogance or perhaps desperation. Poirot placed the note in a handkerchief, preserving it for later analysis, and stepped into the hall, his flashlight casting a narrow beam. The corridor was empty, the shadows deep, but the faint creak of a floorboard suggested someone had fled moments before. He moved silently, his senses alert, following the sound to the staircase, where it faded into the manor's labyrinthine depths. Returning to his room, Poirot locked the door and sat at the desk, his mind racing. The second threat was a new piece of the puzzle, but it also raised questions. Why warn him now? To scare him away or to distract him from a critical clue? He turned his attention to the desk itself, a sturdy piece of oak with intricate carvings. On a whim, he pressed the edges, searching for hidden compartments, a habit born of countless cases. A soft click rewarded his efforts, and a small drawer sprang open, revealing a single document, a draft of Sir Reginald's will, different from the one found in the study. This version named an unexpected heir, not Elise, as the earlier draft suggested, but a charitable foundation with Lady Clara as its executor. The document was unsigned, but its implications were profound. Lady Clara stood to gain control of a vast fortune, provided the will was finalized. Poirot folded it carefully, adding it to his growing collection of evidence. The discovery shifted his perspective. The will, the threatening letters, the poisoned brandy, all pointed to a motive rooted in greed or betrayal. But the second threat against him suggested the killer was rattled, perhaps fearing Poirot was closer to the truth than he realized. He decided to use this to his advantage, but first, he needed to explore the manor further, to uncover the physical and psychological terrain of his suspects. He ventured into the darkened halls, his flashlight guiding him. The manor was a maze of corridors and rooms, each steeped in history and secrets. He began in the library where Grayson and Dr. Ward had claimed to be during the murder. The room was vast, its shelves towering to the ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes and scientific journals. The toxicology book he had noticed earlier remained open, a page on cyanide derivatives marked with Dr. Ward's precise handwriting. He examined it closely, noting references to a rare toxin, potassium cyanate, known for its subtle almond-like scent and rapid action. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Had Dr. Ward's expertise been misused? Or was she herself the architect of the crime? Next, he visited Elise's studio, a cluttered space filled with canvases and the sharp scent of turpentine. The portrait of Sir Reginald, half-finished, dominated the room, its eyes hauntingly lifelike. Poirot studied it, noting the care in Elise's brushstrokes, the way she captured her father's stern demeanor but also a flicker of vulnerability. A sketchbook lay open nearby, filled with drawings of the manor's grounds, including a detailed rendering of the study window. The sketch showed the window unbolted, a curious detail given the locked state Poirot had observed. Was this artistic license, or had Elise seen something she hadn't shared? In the billiard room where Rupert had claimed to be, Poirot found the torn betting slip again, its edges singed, bearing Rupert's initials. A nearby ashtray held a cigarette stub, its brand foreign to the manor's usual stock. Poirot pocketed it, suspecting it belonged to Rupert or an accomplice. The room felt heavy with neglect, its green felt table scarred with scratches, a testament to Rupert's reckless habits. He moved to the kitchen, where the maids were clearing the remnants of dinner. Mary, the maid who had discovered Sir Reginald's body, was still shaken, her hands trembling as she stacked plates. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low. "I swear I saw nothing but Sir Reginald through the keyhole, but I heard something earlier, a soft thud like a book falling just before I looked." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "A thud, you say? From the study?" "Yes, sir," she said, her eyes wide. "I thought it was nothing, but now—" He thanked her, his mind turning over the new information. A thud could indicate a struggle, or perhaps the killer dropping something in haste. He made a mental note to re-examine the study for any displaced objects. As he continued his exploration, Poirot visited the conservatory, a glass-walled room, filled with exotic plants, their leaves glistening in the moonlight filtering through the snow-covered panes. A small workbench caught his eye, cluttered with vials and scientific equipment, Dr. Ward's portable laboratory, as she had mentioned during dinner. He examined the vials, finding one labeled potassium cyanate, with a trace of residue inside. The discovery sent a thrill through him. The toxin matched the scent in the study, but was Dr. Ward careless enough to leave such evidence? Or was this another misdirection? The clock struck 10, and Poirot returned to the drawing room, where the fire had dwindled to glowing embers. He sat, his hands clasped, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The second threat was a bold move, but it revealed the killer's fear. The hidden will, the toxicology book, the sketch of the unbolted window, the cigarette stub, the vial of potassium, cyanate, all were pieces of a puzzle that was slowly taking shape. Lady Clara's ambition, Rupert's debts, Elise's resentment, Grayson's business disputes, Dr. Ward's expertise, Colin's loyalty. Each suspect was a thread in a tapestry of deception. A sudden noise, a sharp creak from the hall, snapped Poirot from his thoughts. He rose, his flashlight ready, and moved to the door, but the corridor was empty, the shadows deep. The killer was close, watching, waiting. Poirot's resolve hardened. The second threat was a challenge, but it was also a mistake. The killer had revealed their hand, and Poirot would use it to set a trap. The storm raged on, the manor a fortress of secrets. With less than 20 hours remaining, Poirot's little gray cells were alight, ready to unravel the truth hidden in the shadows. Chapter 7. The Chemist's Secret. The wind howled outside Ravenwood Manor, its icy fingers clawing at the ancient stone walls, as if seeking entry to the secrets locked within. Inside, the air was heavy with the weight of murder, the scent of suspicion lingering like the faint almond-like trace of poison that had claimed Sir Reginald Langston's life. Hercule Poirot stood in the conservatory, a glass-walled sanctuary filled with exotic plants, their leaves glistening under the moonlight filtering through snow-dusted panes. It was nearing 11 o'clock, and the clock of Poirot's 24-hour challenge ticked relentlessly, with less than 19 hours remaining to unmask the killer. The discovery of a threatening note slipped under his door, "Leave or you're next, Poirot," had only sharpened his resolve, a bold taunt from a murderer who underestimated the power of his little gray cells. The conservatory was Dr. Evelyn Ward's domain, a makeshift laboratory where she conducted her chemical research. Poirot's flashlight illuminated a workbench cluttered with vials, pipettes, and a small burner, its flame long extinguished. His sharp eyes gleaming with purpose fixed on a vial labeled potassium cyanate, its contents depleted, a faint residue clinging to the glass. The almond-like scent, identical to that in Sir Reginald's study, sent a thrill through him. This was no coincidence. The toxin, rare and deadly, was the key to the murder, and Dr. Ward, with her expertise, was now a central figure in the puzzle. Poirot's small, meticulous frame moved with deliberate care as he examined the workbench. He wore gloves, a precaution to preserve evidence, and his magnifying glass hovered over the vial. The label was handwritten, the ink fresh, suggesting recent use. Nearby, a notebook lay open, its pages filled with Dr. Ward's precise script, detailing experiments with cyanide derivatives. One entry caught his eye. Potassium cyanate, rapid onset, subtle odor, ideal for controlled applications. The words were clinical, but their implication was chilling. Had Dr. Ward's research been twisted into a tool for murder, or was she herself the architect of the crime? He pocketed the notebook, careful to leave no trace of his intrusion, and turned his attention to the surrounding plants. Orchids and ferns crowded the space, their lush greenery a stark contrast to the sterile equipment. A small jar of fertilizer, its lid ajar, sat among the vials, its contents innocuous at first glance. Yet Poirot's instincts, honed by years of unraveling deception, prompted him to examine it closer. A faint, powdery residue clung to the rim, and a careful sniff revealed a trace of the same almond-like scent. He sealed a sample in a vial, his mind racing. The killer had access to Dr. Ward's materials, but was it her hand that wielded them, or someone exploiting her work? Leaving the conservatory, Poirot moved through the darkened corridors, his flashlight casting long shadows. The manor was a labyrinth of secrets, each room a potential repository of clues. He returned to the study where Sir Reginald's body remained, a grim reminder of the stakes. The locked door, the bolted window, the stopped pocket watch at 11:07 p.m. all pointed to a killer within the household. The threatening note against him suggested the murderer was growing restless, perhaps fearing Poirot's progress. But the chemist's secret, the vial of potassium cyanate, was a breakthrough, a thread he could pull to unravel the tapestry of deceit. He sat at Sir Reginald's desk, avoiding the spilled brandy glass, and reviewed his mental map of the suspects. Lady Clara, with her cold ambition, stood to gain from the unsigned will naming her executor of a charitable foundation. Rupert, drowning in gambling debts, resented his father's control. Elise, disinherited yet named in an earlier will, hid her pain behind her art. Harold Grayson, Sir Reginald's business partner, nursed a grudge over a failed deal. Collins, the loyal butler, had access to the study and a tremor in his hand that betrayed unease. And Dr. Ward, with her knowledge of toxins, was now a focal point, her laboratory a potential arsenal for murder. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. He rose, his senses alert, and opened it, to find Dr. Ward herself, her auburn hair slightly disheveled, her green eyes sharp in the dim light. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice calm but edged, "I noticed the conservatory door ajar. Have you been there?" Poirot's smile was polite, enigmatic. "Madame, I am everywhere and nowhere in my search for truth. You have concerns. About your laboratory?" She hesitated, her hands clasped tightly. "It's sensitive work. I'd prefer it undisturbed. Yet it may hold the key to Sir Reginald's death," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "This potassium cyanide, it is a dangerous substance, no?" Her eyes narrowed, but her composure held. "It's a research tool, Monsieur Poirot, used for studying cellular reactions, not for what you imply." "And yet," Poirot continued, "the scent in the study matches your vial. A coincidence, perhaps?" Dr. Ward's lips tightened. "Anyone could have taken it. The conservatory is not locked. I've been careless, perhaps, but I am no murderer." Poirot nodded, his gaze never leaving her face. "We shall see, Doctor. The truth, it reveals itself in time." She left, her footsteps fading into the hall, and Poirot locked the door again. Her presence was no accident. She was watching him, just as the killer was. He returned to the desk, his mind turning over. Her words. Her denial was plausible, but her calm was too perfect, her explanation too neat. He needed more. He ventured into the manor's upper floors, where the family's private quarters lay. Lady Clara's room was a study in elegance, its silk drapes and gilded mirrors reflecting her status. A locked jewelry box caught his eye, but he left it untouched, noting its prominence. Rupert's room was a mess, littered with empty bottles and racing forms, a stark contrast to his mother's order. A hidden drawer in his desk revealed a stack of IOUs, some signed to unsavory names, confirming his debts. Elise's room was sparse, filled with sketches and half-finished canvases, including one of the study window unbolted as he had seen in her studio. Grayson's guest room held a briefcase with documents detailing a failed shipping deal, with Sir Reginald's signature crossed out in angry red ink. Each room offered a glimpse into motive, but none provided a definitive answer. In the servants' quarters, Poirot found Collins's small room, austere but orderly. A photograph of a younger Collins with Sir Reginald suggested long service, but a locked tin box under the bed hinted at secrets. Poirot left it, respecting the need for further evidence before intrusion. As midnight approached, he returned to the drawing room, where the fire had dwindled to glowing coals. He sat, his hands clasped, his eyes half closed, but his mind was a whirlwind of deduction. The chemist's secret, the vial, the notebook, the fertilizer jar, pointed to Dr. Ward, but her openness suggested either innocence or cunning. The threatening note was a bold move, revealing the killer's fear of Poirot's progress. The unsigned will, the betting slips, the sketches, the business documents, all were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. A faint noise, a soft thud from the hall, snapped him from his reverie. He moved to the door, his flashlight ready, but found only darkness. The manor was alive with secrets, and the killer was close. Poirot's resolve hardened. The chemist's secret was a critical clue, but it was not the whole truth. He would set a trap, but first he needed to test the suspect's reactions. The clock struck 12, the storm raging outside. With less than 18 hours remaining, Poirot's little gray cells were alight, ready to uncover the truth hidden in the chemist's secret and the shadows beyond. Chapter 8. The Midnight Intruder. The clock in Ravenwood Manor's Grand Hall struck midnight, its deep chimes echoing through the silent corridors, a solemn reminder of the fleeting hours in Hercule Poirot's self-imposed 24-hour challenge to unmask Sir Reginald Langston's killer. The snowstorm outside raged unabated, its icy gusts rattling the manor's tall windows, sealing the inhabitants in a fortress of secrets and suspicion. The air inside was heavy with the weight of murder, the faint almond-like scent of poison lingering in Poirot's memory as he moved through the darkened halls, his small, meticulous frame guided by the narrow beam of his flashlight. The discovery of a threatening note slipped under his door. "Leave, or you're next, Poirot." And the vial of potassium cyanate in Dr. Evelyn Ward's laboratory had sharpened his focus, confirming that the killer was not only bold, but also desperate to derail his investigation. Poirot had just returned to the drawing room, its embers casting a faint glow, when a piercing scream shattered the silence, slicing through the manor like a blade. It came from the upper floors, high and frantic, unmistakably Elise Langston's voice. Poirot's heart quickened, not with fear but with the thrill of a new clue. He moved swiftly, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floors, his flashlight cutting through the shadows as he ascended the grand staircase. The others emerged from their rooms, their faces pale in the dim light. Lady Clara, her black robe hastily tied, Rupert, bleary-eyed and disheveled, Harold Grayson, clutching a dressing gown, Dr. Ward, her composure intact but her eyes alert, and Collins, the butler, already at the top of the stairs, his lantern raised. "Mademoiselle Elise," Poirot called, his voice calm but commanding as he reached her door. It was ajar, and inside, Elise stood trembling in the center of her room, her paint-stained nightgown clinging to her slight frame, her eyes wide with terror. "What has happened?" he asked, stepping inside, his gaze sweeping the room. I saw someone," Elise stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, "a figure in the shadows. They were at my window, then they fled. I screamed and they ran toward the attic." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching as he processed her words. The room was sparsely furnished, filled with sketches and canvases, the air heavy with the scent of turpentine. The window was shut, its latch secure, but the curtains were slightly askew, as if disturbed. He moved to the window, his flashlight illuminating the snow outside. The drift was untouched, confirming no one had climbed in or out, yet Elise's fear was genuine. He turned to her, his tone gentle but probing. "Describe this figure, mademoiselle. Every detail, s'il vous plaît." "It was dark," she said, her hands twisting her nightgown. "A silhouette, tall, moving quickly. I couldn't see their face, but they wore something long, like a coat or cloak. They were at the window, then gone." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The attic, a place to hide, to conceal evidence. He turned to the others, now crowded in the doorway. "Mes amis, remain here with Mademoiselle Elise. Monsieur Collins, accompany me to the attic. We must investigate at once." Collins nodded, his face pale but composed, and led the way to a narrow staircase at the end of the hall. The others hesitated, their eyes darting between Poirot and each other, but Lady Clara's sharp voice cut through. "Do as he says. We can't have more chaos tonight." The attic stairs creaked under Poirot's careful steps, the air growing colder and mustier as they ascended. Collins held his lantern high, its light revealing cobwebs and dust-covered trunks. The attic was a vast shadowed space, filled with relics of the Langston family's past, old furniture, faded portraits, and crates of forgotten belongings. Poirot's flashlight swept the floor, searching for signs of disturbance. Near a small circular window, he found what he sought. Faint, muddy footprints, barely visible in the dust, leading to a corner where a pile of crates was stacked haphazardly. "Regardez," Poirot said, pointing to the footprints. "Our intruder was here, and recently." He followed the trail, his movements precise until he reached the crates. Behind them, tucked against the wall, was a small leather satchel, its clasp undone. Inside he found a bundle of letters, there, paper matching the threatening notes. But these were different, personal, written in Sir Reginald's hand, addressed to Harold Grayson. The words were sharp, accusing Grayson of siphoning funds from their joint ventures, threatening legal action. "A motive most compelling," Poirot murmured, pocketing the letters. Collins, standing nearby, shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, those letters, Sir Reginald kept them hidden. I didn't know they were here. Poirot's eyes flicked to the butler, noting the slight tremor in his voice. And yet you know of their existence, Monsieur Collins. How is this? Collins flushed, his hands clasped tightly. I overheard Sir Reginald speaking of them. He was angry with Mr. Grayson, said he'd betrayed him. I never saw the letters myself. Poirot nodded, his expression neutral but his mind alert. The footprints, the letters, the intruder, all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a single act of murder. He examined the attic further, finding a small trapdoor leading to the roof, its latch rusted but recently disturbed. No footprints led outside, but the trapdoor suggested an escape route, one the intruder might have used to avoid detection. He secured it, ensuring no one could use it again without his knowledge. Returning to Elise's room, Poirot found the others still gathered, their faces a mix of fear and suspicion. Elise sat on her bed, a blanket around her shoulders, her eyes red from crying. Lady Clara stood by the window, her posture rigid, while Rupert leaned against the wall, his whiskey glass empty. Grayson and Dr. Ward stood apart, their expressions guarded. Mademoiselle Elise, Poirot said, his voice soothing, you are safe now. But tell me this figure, did they carry anything? A weapon, perhaps? She shook her head, her voice trembling. I didn't see. It was too dark, they just moved so fast. Poirot turned to the group. Mes amis, this intruder suggests the killer is not yet done. I have found evidence in the attic, letters that reveal a betrayal. The truth is close, but we must remain vigilant. Grayson's face paled, his voice sharp. Letters? What letters? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. All in good time, Monsieur Grayson. For now, return to your rooms. Monsieur Collins, ensure the doors are locked. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered in Elise's room, examining the window more closely. A faint scratch on the latch suggested it had been tampered with, though not opened. He stepped into the hall, his flashlight tracing the floor, and found a single muddy smudge near the staircase matching the attic footprints. The intruder had been careless, leaving a trail that confirmed their presence within the manor. He moved to the study where Sir Reginald's body remained, the scene, preserved as he had ordered. The stopped pocket watch, the spilled brandy, the faint scent of potassium cyanate. All were pieces of a puzzle now complicated by the midnight intruder. He re-examined the desk, finding a small key hidden beneath a blotter, its size suggesting it fit a private drawer or safe. Testing it on the desk, he opened a locked compartment, revealing a single page, a draft of a contract between Sir Reginald and Grayson, with clauses heavily amended, suggesting a bitter dispute. The page was dated the day before, adding weight to the attic letters. Poirot's exploration continued through the manor's lower floors. In the billiard room, he found a cigarette stub, its foreign brand matching the one from earlier, hinting at Rupert's involvement or an outsider's presence. In Dr. Ward's conservatory, the vial of potassium cyanate remained, its contents undisturbed since his last visit. But a small syringe nearby caught his eye, its needle clean but suspiciously placed. In Lady Clara's sitting room, a locked diary on her writing desk tempted him, but he left it, needing more justification to invade her privacy. As the clock struck 1, Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The midnight intruder was a critical clue. Revealing. Chapter 9. Unraveling Alibis. The grand hall of Ravenwood Manor was shrouded in darkness, save for the faint glow of Hercule Poirot's flashlight as it cut through the shadows. The clock on the wall struck 1 in the morning, its chimes a somber reminder of the dwindling hours in Poirot's 24-hour quest to unmask the murderer of Sir Reginald Langston. The snowstorm outside continued its relentless assault, sealing the manor in a prison of ice and secrets. The air was thick with suspicion, each creak of the ancient timbers amplifying the tension that gripped the household. The midnight intruder, in Elise's room, and the discovery of accusatory letters in the attic had heightened Poirot's senses, confirming that the killer was not only within these walls, but also growing desperate to evade his scrutiny. Poirot stood in the drawing room, its embers barely alive, casting a faint warmth against the chill that permeated the manor. His small, meticulous frame was a beacon of calm amidst the storm of fear and deception. The threatening note, "Leave or you're next, Poirot," lay, folded in his pocket, a bold challenge from a killer who underestimated his resolve. The vial of potassium cyanate in Dr. Ward's conservatory, the stopped pocket watch, the burned ledger fragments, and now the attic letters all pointed to a complex web of motives: greed, betrayal, revenge. But the alibis of the suspects, Lady Clara, Rupert, Elise, Harold Grayson, Dr. Evelyn Ward, and Collins the butler, were too neat, too rehearsed, and Poirot knew that unraveling them was the key to exposing the truth. He decided to re-interview each suspect, this time with a sharper focus, probing for inconsistencies that might crack their carefully constructed facades. He began by summoning them back to the drawing room, a task Collins carried out with his usual efficiency, though Poirot noted the butler's eyes lingered on Lady Clara as he escorted her in. The group assembled reluctantly, their faces etched with exhaustion and unease. Lady Clara sat with regal composure, her black dress a stark contrast to her pale skin. Rupert slouched in an armchair, his hands fidgeting without a glass to hold. Elise perched on the edge of a settee, her paint-stained fingers clutching a handkerchief. Grayson stood by the window, his wiry frame tense, while Dr. Ward sat calmly, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes unreadable. Collins remained, by the door, his posture rigid, a silent sentinel. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice soft but commanding. "The hour grows late and the truth remains elusive. Your alibis, they are like a house of cards, plausible but fragile. I will ask again where each of you was between 9 and 10 this evening, when Sir Reginald met his fate. Speak with care, for Hercule Poirot sees through deception." "Lady," Clara spoke first, her tone clipped. "As I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was in my room reading. I heard nothing until Mary's scream." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching. "And yet, madame, your maid mentioned seeing you in the hall near the study at 9:30, adjusting a vase. A curious detail, no?" Her face paled, but she recovered quickly. "The maid is mistaken. I was in my room. Perhaps she saw someone else." Poirot nodded, filing away her denial. He turned to Rupert, whose bloodshot eyes darted nervously. "Monsieur Rupert, you were in the billiard room. Alone, oui?" "Yeah," Rupert muttered, his voice sullen. "Playing a few rounds to clear my head. No one else was there." "And yet," Poirot said, producing the torn betting slip from his pocket, its edges singed, "this was found in the billiard room near the ashtray. It bears your initials, and a cigarette stub of a foreign brand, not common in this house. You were not alone, perhaps?" Rupert's flush deepened, his hands clenching. "I don't know about any cigarette. I was alone, I swear. That slip, I must have dropped it earlier." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "We shall see, monsieur." He turned to Elise, whose delicate frame seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Mademoiselle Elise, you were in your studio painting your father's portrait?" "Yes," she whispered, her eyes downcast. "I was alone, working. I didn't hear anything until the scream." "But your sketchbook," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing, "contains a drawing of the study window unbolted, a detail most curious given the window was locked when we found your father. You saw something, perhaps?" Elise's hands trembled, her voice barely audible. "It was just a sketch. I imagined it, for the painting. I didn't see anything." Poirot nodded, noting the fear in her eyes. He turned to Grayson, whose pinched face was taut with tension. "Monsieur Grayson, you and Dr. Ward were in the library discussing business, oui?" "Yes," Grayson said, his voice sharp. "We were there until the scream. We didn't hear or see anything unusual. And yet," Poirot said, holding up the attic letters, "these found hidden accuse you of financial misconduct. Sir Reginald was prepared to take action against you. This gives you motive, non?" Grayson's eyes widened, his voice rising. "Those are lies. Reginald and I had disagreements, but I didn't kill him," Dr. Ward interjected, her voice calm. "Monsieur Poirot, you're grasping at shadows. Those letters prove nothing. Harold and I were in the library, as we said. Poirot's gaze shifted to her, his eyes piercing. "And your laboratory, Doctor, contains potassium cyanate, the very toxin that killed Sir Reginald. You claim it was for research, but it is a coincidence most striking." Her lips tightened, but her composure held. "As I said, anyone could have taken it. The conservatory is not locked." Finally, Poirot turned to Collins. "Monsieur Collins, you brought Sir Reginald his brandy at 9:30, then returned to the kitchen. You saw nothing unusual?" "No, sir," Collins said, his voice steady but his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "He was at his desk, writing. I locked the door and left." "And yet," Poirot said, his tone soft but relentless, "your eyes, they linger on Lady Clara. A loyalty, perhaps, that goes beyond duty?" Collins flushed, his posture stiffening. "I serve the family, sir. Nothing more." Poirot dismissed them with a wave, instructing Collins to ensure they returned to their rooms. As the group dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, Poirot remained in the drawing room, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The alibis were crumbling: Lady Clara's presence in the hall, Rupert's cigarette stub, Elise's sketch, Grayson's letters, Dr. Ward's toxin, Collins' hesitation. Each was a crack in the facade, but the truth remained elusive. He moved to the study, where Sir Reginald's body lay, the scene preserved as he had ordered. The stopped pocket watch, the spilled brandy, the faint scent of potassium cyanate, all were pieces of a puzzle now complicated by the unraveling alibis. He re-examined the desk, finding a small ink smudge on the blotter, suggesting a letter written in haste. The hidden will, naming a charitable foundation with Lady Clara as executor, added another layer of motive. The attic letters accusing Grayson pointed to betrayal, but were they genuine or planted? Poirot ventured into the manor's corridors, his flashlight tracing the shadows. In the billiard room, he found a second cigarette stub, matching the first, hidden under a table. In Elise's studio, a paintbrush bore a trace of a chemical scent, faint but unmistakable. In the library, a misplaced bookmark in the toxicology book suggested someone had returned to it recently. Each clue tightened the web, but the killer's identity remained just out of reach. As the clock struck 2, Poirot returned to the drawing room, his hands clasped, his eyes half closed. The unraveling alibis revealed a household steeped in secrets, greed, resentment, betrayal. The midnight intruder, the threatening note, the chemical clues, all pointed to a killer who was both cunning and desperate. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, ready to set a trap that would force the murderer's hand. The storm raged on, the manor a fortress of deception. With less than 17 hours remaining, Poirot knew the truth was close, hidden in the cracks of the suspects' alibis. Chapter 10. The third clue. A hidden message. The darkness of Ravenwood Manor was a living thing, its shadows shifting with every gust of the snowstorm that battered the ancient stone walls. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, its towering, shelves laden with leather-bound volumes, their spines gleaming faintly in the light of his flashlight. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 2:30 in the morning, its chimes a stark reminder of the dwindling hours in Poirot's 24-hour quest to unmask the murderer of Sir Reginald Langston. The manor, sealed by the relentless storm, was a fortress of secrets, and the air was thick with the weight of suspicion, each creak of the timbers amplifying the tension that gripped the household. The midnight intruder in Elise's room, the threatening note slipped under Poirot's door, and the unraveling alibis of the suspects had brought him closer to the truth. But a critical piece of the puzzle remained elusive. Poirot's sharp eyes, gleaming with purpose, scanned the library, where Harold Grayson and Dr. Evelyn Ward had claimed to be during the murder. The toxicology book, still open to a page on potassium cyanate, lay on a table, its bookmark slightly askew, suggesting recent disturbance, but it was a small leather-bound journal tucked behind a row of books on a lower shelf that caught his attention. Its cover was worn, its pages yellowed, and it bore Sir Reginald's initials in faded gold. Poirot retrieved it with care, his gloved fingers avoiding any smudging of potential evidence. As he opened it, a single page slipped out, its edges crisp, as if recently written. The words, in Sir Reginald's bold hand, were a coded message, a series of numbers and letters arranged in a grid. 3712 BTC closed trusted. Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. A hidden message, he murmured. Sir Reginald, you were a man of secrets, and now you speak from beyond the grave. He sat at the library table, his flashlight casting a pool of light, and began to decipher the code. The numbers 3712 could refer to pages, lines, or words in a specific text, a common method for coded messages. The letters BTC might indicate initials, book titles, or a cipher key. The phrase closed trusted was the most revealing, suggesting a betrayal by someone Sir Reginald considered an ally. Poirot's little gray cells hummed with activity as he cross-referenced the journal's other entries, which detailed Sir Reginald's business dealings, family disputes, and cryptic references to debts unpaid and sins uncovered. One entry mentioned a meeting with Grayson, marked with the word betrayal underlined twice, echoing the attic letters accusing him of financial misconduct. Poirot turned to a shelf of reference books, suspecting the code might point to a specific volume. He scanned the titles, his fingers brushing against a copy of the complete works of Shakespeare, a favorite for coded messages due to its ubiquity. Opening it to page 3, line 7, word 12, he found nothing significant. He tried other combinations, page 7, line 12, page 3, word 12, but the results were inconclusive. Frustrated but undeterred, he considered the letters BTC. Could they be initials? None of the suspects, Clara, Rupert, Elise, Grayson, Ward, or Collins, matched perfectly, but close trusted suggested someone intimate, perhaps a family member or confidant. He returned to the journal, flipping through its pages. A later entry caught his eye. The key lies in the family crest. The Langston crest, a shield with a lion and 3 stars, was embossed on the manor's stationery, including the threatening letters. Poirot retrieved one of the letters from his pocket, comparing its script to the journal. The handwriting differed, but the ink was identical, suggesting the killer had access to Sir Reginald's private supplies. The crest's stars, 3 in number, resonated with the code's numbers, 3712. On a hunch, he returned to the study where Sir Reginald's body remained, the scene preserved as he had ordered. The study was a fortress of solitude, its heavy oak door locked, its window bolted, the snow outside untouched. Poirot approached the desk where the stopped pocket watch, the spilled brandy glass, and the faint scent of potassium cyanate lingered. Above the desk hung a framed depiction of the Langston crest, its 3 stars gleaming in the flashlight's beam. He examined it closely, noting a slight irregularity in the frame's edge. Pressing it, he heard a soft click, and a small panel slid open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a continuation of the coded message. 3rd star, 7th book, 12th word, beware the trusted. Poirot's heart quickened. The 3rd star could refer to the crest's design, but the 7th book and 12th word pointed back to the library. He hurried back, his steps swift but silent, and counted the books on the shelf where he had found the journal. The 7th book was a volume on heraldry, its pages brittle with age. Opening it to the 12th word on the 3rd page, he found the word betrayal underlined faintly, as if Sir Reginald had marked it deliberately. The message was clear. Someone close, someone trusted, had betrayed him, and the code was his. Attempt to leave a clue for posterity. The discovery sent a thrill through Poirot. The hidden message was the 3rd clue, following the stopped watch and the potassium cyanate vial, each pointing to a killer within the household. But who? Lady? Clara, with her ambition to control the estate? Rupert, desperate to escape his debts? Elise, hiding resentment behind her art? Grayson, accused of financial betrayal? Dr. Ward, with her access to the toxin? Or Collins, whose loyalty masked a deeper secret? Poirot moved through the manor, his flashlight tracing the corridors. He revisited Elise's studio, where the sketch of the unbolted study window now seemed more significant. Had she seen something, or was she planting a false clue? In the billiard room, a second cigarette stub, matching the foreign brand, suggested Rupert's involvement or an outsider's presence. In Dr. Ward's conservatory, the syringe he had noticed earlier bore a trace of residue, confirming its connection to the toxin. In Lady Clara's sitting room, a locked diary tempted him, but he resisted, needing more evidence to justify intrusion. As the clock struck 3, Poirot returned to the drawing room, its fire reduced to glowing coals. He sat, his hands clasped, his eyes half closed, but his mind was a whirlwind of deduction. The hidden message, "Beware the trusted," pointed to a conspiracy, perhaps involving more than one person. The threatening note against him, the intruder in Elise's room, the chemical clues, all suggested a killer who was both cunning and desperate. Poirot's resolve hardened. He would set a trap, but first, he needed to test the suspect's reactions to this new clue. He summoned the group to the drawing room, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. "Mes amis," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "I have found a message from Sir Reginald, hidden in his journal. It speaks of betrayal by someone trusted. Does anyone wish to confess?" A heavy silence fell. Lady Clara's eyes narrowed. Rupert shifted uncomfortably. Elise clutched her handkerchief. Grayson's face paled. Dr. Ward remained impassive, and Collins's hands trembled slightly. No one spoke, but their reactions were telling. Poirot dismissed them, instructing Collins to lock their doors and return to his room, his mind alight with possibilities. The storm raged on, the manor a prison of secrets. With less than 16 hours remaining, Poirot's little gray cells were ready to unravel the truth hidden in the third clue. Chapter 11. The trap is set. The darkness of Ravenwood Manor was a palpable force, its shadows deepening as the snowstorm raged outside, sealing the estate in a cocoon of isolation. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand drawing room, the embers of the fire casting a faint glow across the ornate furnishings, their dim light barely holding back the chill that permeated the air. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 3:30 in the morning, its chimes a relentless reminder of the 16 hours remaining in Poirot's self-imposed 24-hour challenge to unmask the murderer of Sir Reginald Langston. The discovery of a coded message in Sir Reginald's journal, "Beware the trusted," had confirmed a betrayal at the heart of the household, and the threatening note slipped under Poirot's door, "Leave or you're next," revealed a killer desperate to halt his investigation. Now, with the alibis of the suspects crumbling and the clues mounting, Poirot knew the time had come to force the murderer's hand. His small, meticulous frame was a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that gripped the manor. The stopped pocket watch, the potassium cyanate vial, the attic letters accusing Harold Grayson, the muddy footprints from the midnight intruder, and the hidden message, all were pieces of a puzzle pointing to a killer among the household. Lady Clara, Rupert, Elise, Grayson, Dr. Evelyn Ward, or Collins the butler. Each had a motive: greed, resentment, betrayal, and each had woven a web of half-truths. Poirot's little gray cells were alight with purpose, and he resolved to set a trap, a calculated gambit to provoke the killer into revealing themselves. He moved to the writing desk in the corner of the drawing room, its surface cluttered with Sir Reginald's stationery, the Langston crest embossed on every sheet. With deliberate care he penned a letter, its words crafted to mimic the threatening notes. "The truth is known. The killer will be named at midnight. Flee while you can." The handwriting was a careful forgery, replicating the jagged script of the earlier threats, a task made easier by the ink and paper he had found in the study. He sealed the letter in an envelope, addressing it to the guilty, and placed it in his pocket, his plan taking shape. Poirot's strategy was simple but bold. He would announce to the household that he had solved the case and would reveal the killer's identity at midnight, less than 9 hours away. The forged letter, planted where the killer would find it, would serve as bait, designed to provoke a reaction, panic, a mistake, or an attempt to silence him. He knew the risks. The threatening note against him suggested a murderer willing to kill again, but Hercule Poirot was no stranger to danger, and his faith in his intellect was unshakable. He summoned Collins, who appeared promptly, his face pale but composed, his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. "Monsieur Collins," Poirot said, his voice soft but commanding. "Gather the household in the drawing room at once. I have an announcement to make." Collins nodded, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Yes, sir. Shall I wake them?" "Oui, it is necessary," Poirot replied. "The truth waits for no one, not even in the dead of night." As Collins departed, Poirot moved through the manor, his flashlight tracing the silent corridors. He chose his location carefully. The library where Grayson and Dr. Ward had claimed to be during the murder. The room's towering shelves and dim corners offered a perfect stage for his trap. He placed the forged letter on the table, partially. Hidden beneath the toxicology book, its edge protruding just enough to catch the eye of someone searching for secrets. The book, still open to a page on potassium cyanate, added a layer of provocation, suggesting Poirot had connected the toxin to the killer. He returned to the drawing room, where the suspects soon gathered, their faces etched with exhaustion and suspicion. Lady Clara sat with regal poise, her black robe accentuating her sharp beauty, her gray eyes wary. Rupert slouched in an armchair, his bloodshot eyes darting nervously, his hands empty without his usual whiskey glass. Elise perched on a settee, her paint-stained fingers clutching a handkerchief, her eyes red from crying or fear. Grayson stood by the window, his wiry frame tense, his pinched face betraying a flicker of panic. Dr. Ward sat calmly, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes unreadable but alert. Collins stood by the door, his posture rigid, his gaze lingering briefly on Lady Clara. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice resonating with authority. "Hercule Poirot has uncovered the truth behind Sir Reginald's murder. The clues, the stopped watch, the poison, the hidden message, the letters of betrayal, have spoken. At midnight tonight, I will name the killer in this very room. Until then, I ask that you remain vigilant, for the murderer is among us, and they are desperate." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the howl of the storm outside. Lady Clara's lips tightened, her hands clenching in her lap. "This is preposterous," she said, her voice sharp. "You accuse us without proof?" Poirot's smile was serene, but unyielding. "Madame, the proof is in the details, and Hercule Poirot misses nothing. The killer will reveal themselves one way or another." Rupert snorted, his voice slurred. "You're bluffing, old man. You've got nothing." Elise's voice trembled as she spoke. "Monsieur Poirot, what if they come for us, next?" Poirot's gaze softened. "Fear not, mademoiselle, I am here to protect you. But the truth requires courage." Grayson's face paled, his voice rising. "This is a witch hunt. You're stirring panic to cover your own failure." Dr. Ward's tone was calm, almost clinical. "Monsieur Poirot, if you have evidence, why wait until midnight? Why this theatrics?" Poirot's eyes met hers, piercing. "Because, doctor, the killer must believe they have time to act. And in their action, they will betray themselves." Collins cleared his throat, his voice steady but strained. "Shall I ensure the doors are locked, sir?" "Oui, Monsieur Collins," Poirot said. "No one leaves the manor. The trap is set." The group dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, their expressions a mix of fear, anger, and suspicion. Poirot returned to the library, positioning himself in a shadowed corner where he could observe the table without being seen. He extinguished his flashlight, relying on the faint moonlight filtering through the snow-covered windows. The forged letter lay in wait, a silent challenge to the killer's nerve. Hours passed, the manor creaking under the storm's assault. Poirot's senses were alert, his body still but his mind racing. At 5:30, a soft creak in the hall signaled movement. A figure entered the library, their silhouette tall and cloaked, moving with cautious steps. Poirot held his breath, his eyes narrowing as the figure approached the table. They paused, their hand hovering over the toxicology book, then seized the forged letter, their movements swift but unsteady. The dim light caught their profile, Harold Grayson, his pinched face taut with panic. Grayson tore open the envelope, his eyes scanning the forged note. His breath hitched and he stuffed the letter into his pocket, glancing around nervously. Poirot stepped from the shadows, his voice soft but commanding. "Monsieur Grayson, you seek something, oui?" Grayson froze, his face draining of color. I was looking for a book. I couldn't sleep." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "A book or a confession? The letter you hold is not what it seems, but your reaction, it speaks volumes." Grayson's hands trembled, his voice rising. "This is a trick. You're trying to frame me." "Non," Poirot said, his tone calm but relentless. "I seek only the truth. Why do you fear my announcement? What do you hide?" Grayson's eyes darted to the door, but Poirot stepped closer, his presence commanding. I didn't kill him," Grayson stammered. "But I knew about the letters. Reginald accused me of stealing, but it wasn't me. Someone else was manipulating him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Someone else?" "Name them, monsieur." Grayson hesitated, his voice dropping to a whisper. I can't. They'd destroy me." Before Poirot could press further, a second figure appeared in the doorway. Dr. Ward, her auburn hair glinting in the moonlight. "Harold, what are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp but controlled. Grayson spun, his panic palpable. "Evelyn, nothing, I was just—" Poirot interrupted, his voice cutting through the tension. "Dr. Ward, your presence is most timely. Perhaps you can explain why Monsieur Grayson seeks a letter that accuses the killer." Dr. Ward's composure held, but her eyes flickered. "I don't know what you're talking about, monsieur." "Poirot, I heard a noise and came to investigate." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging their reactions. Grayson's panic, Dr. Ward's calm. They were connected, perhaps accomplices, or perhaps one was using the other. He let them go, instructing them to return to their rooms, but he kept the library under watch, suspecting others might be drawn to the bait. As dawn approached, the storm showed no sign of abating. Poirot returned to the drawing room, his hands clasped, his eyes half closed, but his mind a whirlwind of deduction. The trap had worked, exposing Grayson's fear and Dr. Ward's vigilance, but the killer remained elusive. The forged letter had provoked a reaction, but it also heightened the danger. With midnight looming, Poirot knew the killer would act again, and he would be ready. Chapter 12. The Killer's Mistake. The snowstorm outside Ravenwood Manor howled with unrelenting fury, its icy gusts battering the ancient stone walls, as if the elements themselves were conspiring to keep the manor's secrets locked within. Inside, the air was thick with suspicion, the weight of Sir Reginald Langston's murder pressing heavily on the household. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand library, its towering shelves casting long shadows in the dim light of his flashlight. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 6 in the morning, its chimes a stark reminder of the 14 hours remaining in Poirot's 24-hour quest to unmask the killer. The trap he had set, announcing he would name the murderer at midnight and planting a forged letter, had provoked a reaction, with Harold Grayson's panicked retrieval of the bait, and Dr. Evelyn Ward's timely intervention revealing their unease. But the killer remained elusive, and Poirot knew the next move would be critical. His small, meticulous frame moved with deliberate calm, his sharp eyes gleaming with purpose. The stopped pocket watch, the potassium cyanate vial, the attic letters, the midnight intruder, the coded message, and now Grayson's reaction to the forged letter, all were pieces of a puzzle pointing to a killer among the household. Lady. Clara, Rupert, Elise, Grayson, Dr. Ward, or Collins the butler, the threatening note slipped under his door, "Leave or your next Poirot," had only sharpened his resolve, a sign that the killer was rattled by his progress. Poirot's little gray cells were alight, and he sensed the murderer was on the verge of a mistake that would expose them. He returned to the drawing room where the embers glowed faintly, and reviewed his mental map of the case. The forged letter had flushed out Grayson, but his claim of protecting someone else suggested a deeper conspiracy. Poirot decided to maintain pressure on the suspects, observing their reactions as the midnight deadline loomed. He instructed Collins to keep the household confined to their rooms, but he suspected the killer would not remain idle. A desperate murderer cornered by time would act, and Poirot intended to be ready. As dawn broke, the storm showed no sign of abating, the snow piling higher against the windows. Poirot moved through the manor's corridors, his flashlight tracing the shadows, searching for any sign of disturbance. In the study, where Sir Reginald's body remained, he re-examined the desk, noting a faint ink smudge on the blotter, suggesting a letter written in haste. The hidden will, naming Lady Clara as executor of a charitable foundation, and the earlier draft favoring Elise, pointed to conflicting motives. The attic letters accusing Grayson of financial misconduct added another layer, but Poirot suspected they were planted to divert suspicion. He visited the billiard room, where Rupert's cigarette stubs and torn betting slip hinted at his presence during the murder, despite his claim of solitude. In Elise's studio, the sketch of the unbolted study window now seemed deliberate, perhaps a subconscious clue or a misdirection. In Dr. Ward's conservatory, the syringe with a trace of potassium cyanate residue confirmed her access to the toxin, but her calm denial suggested either innocence or cunning. Each clue tightened the web, but the killer's identity remained just out of reach. At 7, a soft thud from the upper floor snapped Poirot from his thoughts. He hurried to the source, finding Elise's door ajar. The young woman slumped on the floor, her face pale, a glass of water spilled beside her. Her pulse was weak but present, and a faint almond-like scent clung to the glass. Poirot's heart quickened. Not another murder, but an attempt, thwarted by chance or miscalculation. He called for Collins, who fetched Dr. Ward, the only one with medical knowledge. The chemist arrived swiftly, her auburn hair disheveled, her green eyes sharp with concern. "Poison," Poirot said, his voice calm but urgent, holding up the glass. "The same as Sir Reginald, oui?" Dr. Ward examined Elise, her movements precise. "It's cyanide, but a smaller dose. She'll recover with rest and oxygen. I'll administer a saline drip." Poirot watched her closely, noting her efficiency, but also her lack of surprise. "A curious coincidence, Doctor, that your toxin is used again." Her eyes met his, unflinching. "As I've said, anyone could have taken it. I'm not the only one with access." Collins and a maid moved Elise to her bed, and Poirot secured the glass, adding it to his evidence. The attempt on Elise's life was a bold move, suggesting the killer feared she knew something, perhaps related to her sketch or her father's will. It was also a mistake, a reckless act that narrowed the suspect pool. Elise, as the named heir in one will, was a threat to someone's plans, likely Lady Clara or Rupert, but Grayson and Dr. Ward's involvement could not be ruled out. Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room, their faces pale with shock. Lady Clara's composure faltered, her hands trembling slightly. Rupert's bloodshot eyes darted nervously, his hands fidgeting. Grayson stood rigid, his pinched face taut with fear. Dr. Ward remained calm, her hands folded, while Collins hovered by the door, his eyes on Lady Clara. "Mes amis," Poirot said, his voice resonating with authority. "The killer has struck, again attempting to silence Mademoiselle Elise. This is their mistake, for it reveals their fear. The truth is close, and by midnight, I will name the guilty." Lady Clara's voice was sharp. "This is madness, Monsieur Poirot. You accuse us while the real killer roams free." Poirot's smile was serene. "Non, madame, the killer is here, and their desperation betrays them. The poison, the same as Sir Reginald's, points to one with access to Dr. Ward's laboratory." Dr. Ward's lips tightened. "You persist in this, Monsieur Poirot, but I've explained. My materials are not secure." Rupert snorted, his voice slurred. "Why Elise? She's got nothing to do with this." Poirot's eyes flicked to him. "Perhaps, Monsieur Rupert, she knows more than she realizes, or perhaps she is a threat to someone's inheritance." Grayson's voice rose, panicked. "You're twisting everything. I told you. I was protecting someone, not killing." "Enough." Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. "Return to your rooms. The trap is set and the killer will fall." As the group dispersed, Poirot returned to the library, where the forged letter had been taken by Grayson. He planted another clue, a forged note in Sir Reginald's handwriting, accusing Lady Clara of manipulating the will, placed in her sitting room where she would find it. The note was a gamble, designed to provoke a reaction from the true killer, whether Clara or another protecting her. Throughout the morning, Poirot observed the suspects, his presence a constant pressure. Lady Clara grew increasingly agitated, her eyes darting to Collins, who avoided her gaze. Rupert drank heavily, his hands shaking. Grayson and Dr. Ward exchanged hushed words, their alliance strained. Elise, recovering in her room, remained silent, her eyes haunted. At noon, Poirot found Lady Clara in her sitting room, the forged note clutched in her hand, her face pale. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "this is a lie. Reginald never wrote this." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, madame, you fear its implications. Why?" she faltered, her composure cracking. I only wanted to protect the family. Reginald's plans would have ruined us." Before Poirot could press further, a crash from the hall interrupted them. Rupert stood there, a broken vase at his feet, his face flushed with anger. "You're all against me," he shouted. "I didn't do it, but you'll pin it on me." Poirot's calm was unshakable. "Monsieur Rupert, your outburst reveals much. Return to your room." As the day wore on, the manor's tension reached a breaking point. Poirot's trap had stirred the killer's fear, and the attempt on Elise was their first major error. He re-examined the evidence. The watch, stopped to mislead the timeline. The toxin, stolen from Dr. Ward's laboratory. The letters, planted to frame Grayson. The coded message, warning of betrayal. The killer's mistake was their desperation, and Poirot was ready to exploit it. With midnight approaching, the stage was set for the final confrontation. The killer's mistake had narrowed the field, and Poirot's little gray cells were poised to deliver justice. Chapter 13. The Final Confrontation. The snowstorm that had besieged Ravenwood Manor showed its first signs of weakening, its howling winds softening to a mournful sigh, though the drifts still blocked any hope of escape. Inside, the air was electric, with anticipation, the weight of Sir Reginald Langston's murder and the near-fatal attempt on his daughter Elise pressing heavily on the household. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand drawing room, its oak-paneled walls and velvet drapes bathed in the flickering glow of a freshly stoked fire. The clock on the mantelpiece struck 8 in the evening, marking just 4 hours until Poirot's self-imposed midnight deadline to name the killer. His trap, announcing he had solved the case and planting forged letters, had provoked the murderer into a desperate act. And now, with the clues aligned, Poirot was ready to unveil the truth. His small meticulous frame was a pillar of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that gripped the manor. The stopped pocket watch, the potassium cyanate vial, the attic letters, the midnight intruder, the coded message, the threatening note against him, and the failed attempt on Elise's life, all pointed to a killer within the household. Lady Clara, Rupert, Elise, Harold Grayson, Dr. Evelyn Ward, or Collins the butler. The killer's mistake, attempting to silence Elise, had narrowed the field, and Poirot's little gray cells were alight, weaving the threads of evidence into a tapestry of justice. He had spent the day observing the suspects, their nerves fraying under the pressure of his looming announcement. Lady Clara's composure had cracked, her eyes darting to Collins with increasing frequency. Rupert's drinking had escalated, his outbursts growing erratic. Grayson's panic was palpable, his alliance with Dr. Ward strained by mutual suspicion. Dr. Ward remained calm, her clinical demeanor a mask Poirot suspected hid deeper involvement. Collins, ever stoic, betrayed unease in subtle ways, a tremor in his hand, a glance too long at Lady Clara. Elise, recovering in her room, had provided a final clue, A whispered confession that she had seen someone near the study before her, father's death. Though fear had kept her silent. Poirot summoned the household to the drawing room, instructing Collins to ensure every door and window was locked, creating a sealed stage for the confrontation. The suspects gathered reluctantly, their faces pale in the firelight. Lady Clara sat with forced poise, her black dress accentuating her sharp beauty, her gray eyes wary. Rupert slouched in an armchair, a glass of whiskey clutched tightly, his bloodshot eyes darting nervously. Elise, still weak but determined, sat beside a maid, her paint-stained hands trembling. Grayson stood by the window, his wiry frame tense, his pinched face etched with fear. Dr. Ward sat calmly, her auburn hair pulled back, her green eyes unreadable. Collins stood by the door, his posture rigid, his gaze flickering between Lady Clara and Poirot. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. "We stand at the precipice of truth. Sir Reginald Langston was murdered. In his locked study, poisoned by potassium cyanate, his pocket watch stopped to mislead us. A second attempt was made on Mademoiselle Elise, revealing the killer's desperation. The clues, the letters, the coded message, the footprints, the toxin, have spoken, and Hercule Poirot will now name the guilty." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the faint moan of the wind outside. Lady Clara's hands clenched in her lap. Rupert's glass trembled. Elise's eyes widened. Grayson shifted uncomfortably. Dr. Ward's lips tightened, and Collins's face paled. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes sweeping the room. The murder was a crime of precision, requiring access to the study, knowledge of Sir Reginald's habits, and the means to obtain a rare toxin. The stopped watch, set to 11:07, suggested a later death, but the body's warmth placed it near 10. The killer staged this to secure an alibi, but it was their first error. The second was the threatening note against me, revealing their fear. The third, the attempt on Elise, was their gravest mistake, for it pointed to motive. He turned to Lady Clara, his gaze piercing. "Madame Langston, you stood to gain control of a vast fortune through the unsigned will naming you executor. Your ambition is clear, and your presence near the study at 9:30 contradicts your alibi." Lady Clara's voice was sharp, her composure fraying. "This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. I was in my room, as I said. You have no proof." Poirot's smile was serene. "The maid saw you, madam, adjusting a vase, a detail you dismissed. And the forged note accusing you, found in your sitting room, provoked a reaction most telling." He turned to Rupert, whose flush deepened. "Monsieur Rupert, your debts drove you to desperation. The betting slip and cigarette stubs in the billiard room place you there, but not alone. You resented your father's control, oui?" Rupert's voice slurred, his anger rising. "I didn't kill him. Yeah, I hated his rules, but I couldn't do it." Poirot nodded, moving to Elise. "Mademoiselle Elise, your sketch of the unbolted window suggested knowledge of the crime, yet your fear kept you silent. You saw someone near the study, no?" Elise's voice trembled, her eyes red. I saw a shadow, near the door. I was scared to say anything." Poirot's gaze softened, then hardened as he turned to Grayson. "Monsieur Grayson, the attic letters accused you of betrayal, and your panic over the forged letter revealed guilt. You claimed to protect another. Who?" Grayson's face paled, his voice hoarse. I was protecting Evelyn. She didn't do it, but I thought you'd blame her." Dr. Ward's voice cut through, calm but edged. "Monsieur Poirot, this is speculation. My laboratory was unsecured, as I've said. Anyone could have taken the toxin." Poirot's eyes met hers, unyielding. "Indeed, doctor, but your expertise makes you a suspect. The syringe in your conservatory, the toxicology book. Too many coincidences." Finally, he turned to Collins. "Monsieur Collins, your loyalty to the family is unquestioned, yet your glances at Lady Clara betray a deeper bond. You poured the brandy. You had the key. What do you hide?" Collins' face flushed, his hands trembling. I served the family. Sir, I saw nothing, did nothing. Poirot stepped to the center of the room, his voice rising with conviction. The killer is cunning, but not infallible. The coded message, "Beware the trusted," pointed to betrayal. The toxin required expertise, the watch required access, the letters required knowledge. Only one among you fits all. He paused, letting the tension build, then pointed to Lady Clara. Madame Langston, you are the architect of this crime. You poisoned Sir Reginald with potassium cyanate stolen from Dr. Ward's laboratory, staging the watch to mislead the timeline. You manipulated Collins, your reluctant accomplice, to pour the brandy and lock the door. Your motive was greed, to secure the estate through the will you hoped to enforce. The attempt on Elise was to eliminate the rival heir. Lady Clara rose, her face pale, her voice shaking. This is absurd. You have no evidence, only lies. Poirot's voice was relentless. The evidence is in your actions, madame. The ink smudge on the blotter matches your private stationery, used to forge the threatening notes. The vase you adjusted hid a vial of toxin, discarded in haste. Elise saw you, near the study, and Collins' loyalty to you made him complicit. You betrayed Sir Reginald, your trusted husband. Collins stepped forward, his voice breaking. It's true, I didn't know she'd poison him. She asked me to pour the brandy, said it was for his health. I couldn't refuse her. The room erupted in gasps. Lady Clara's composure shattered, her eyes blazing. You fool, Collins, you've ruined everything. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chaos. The trap was set, and you fell, madame. Your desperation to silence Elise was your final mistake. The truth is revealed. Lady Clara sank into her chair, her face ashen, her hands trembling. The others stared, their expressions a mix of shock and relief. Poirot's gaze swept the room, ensuring no detail was missed. The killer's mistake had been their arrogance, believing they could outwit Hercule Poirot. With midnight still hours away, Poirot had fulfilled his promise. The storm outside began to clear, a sign that justice would soon reach Ravenwood Manor. Chapter 14. Justice at Dawn. The first rays began to pierce the snow-laden clouds outside Ravenwood Manor, casting a pale, golden light through the tall windows of the drawing room, signaling the end of the relentless storm that had imprisoned the household for nearly 24 hours. Inside, the air was still heavy with the aftermath of Hercule Poirot's revelation, the unmasking of Lady Clara Langston as Sir Reginald Langston's murderer, with Collins, the butler, as her reluctant accomplice. The clock on the mantelpiece showed 6:30 in the morning, just hours after Poirot's dramatic confrontation, well before his self-imposed midnight deadline. The manor, once a fortress of secrets, now stood exposed, its shadows retreating, as the truth emerged victorious. Poirot's small, meticulous frame stood near the fireplace, his sharp eyes reflecting the flickering flames, his mustache impeccably trimmed, a beacon of calm amidst the emotional wreckage of the night. The suspects remained in the drawing room, their faces a gallery of shock, relief, and exhaustion. Lady Clara sat slumped in an armchair, her black dress crumpled, her gray eyes vacant, the regal poise that had defined her shattered by her confession. Collins stood by the door, his posture rigid, but his face etched with guilt, his hands clasped tightly as if to anchor himself against the weight of his betrayal. Rupert Langston, disheveled and sober for once, sat with his head in his hands, grappling with the reality of his mother's crime. Elise, fragile but resolute, clutched a handkerchief, her paint-stained fingers steady, her eyes bright with a mix of sorrow and hope. Harold Grayson, his wiry frame slumped, looked relieved yet haunted, his fear of being framed dispelled but his business betrayal exposed. Dr. Evelyn Ward, her auburn hair still neatly pulled back, maintained her clinical calm, though her green eyes betrayed a flicker of unease at her laboratory's role in the murder. Poirot cleared his throat, a soft sound that commanded immediate attention. Mes amis, he began, his voice measured, carrying the faint trace of his Belgian accent. The tragedy of Ravenwood Manor is concluded. Lady Clara Langston, driven by greed and fear of losing her status, poisoned Sir Reginald with potassium cyanate, stolen from Dr. Ward's conservatory. She manipulated Monsieur Collins to deliver the fatal brandy, staging the stopped pocket, watched to mislead the timeline. Her attempt to silence Mademoiselle Elise, the rival heir, was her final error. The truth, it always reveals itself to Hercule Poirot. Lady Clara's head jerked up, her voice hoarse but defiant. You think, you've won, Monsieur Poirot. You've torn this family apart, exposed our shame. What justice is that? Poirot's gaze was unyielding, his tone calm but firm. Madame, justice is not vengeance. It is the restoration of order, the protection of the innocent. Your actions brought this upon yourself, and now you must face the consequences. Collins stepped forward, his voice trembling. I never meant for this, sir. She said it was for his health, a tonic to calm him. I trusted her, and I failed Sir Reginald. Poirot's eyes softened briefly. Monsieur Collins, your loyalty was your weakness, but your confession has spared you a greater guilt. The law will judge your part, but your honesty speaks for you. Elise's voice, soft but clear, broke the silence. Monsieur Poirot, what happens now? Father's gone, mother's a murderer. What's left for us? Poirot turned to her, his expression gentle. Mademoiselle Elise, you have your art, your spirit, and now your inheritance. The unsigned will naming you as heir was Sir Reginald's true intent, found in his study. You will rebuild, and Ravenwood will be yours to redeem. Rupert looked up, his bloodshot eyes wide. Elise? Not the foundation? But mother said, your mother lied. Poirot interrupted, his voice cutting through. She forged the will naming her executor, hoping to control the estate. The truth lies in the documents, and they favor Mademoiselle Elise. Grayson cleared his throat, his voice hesitant. And me, Monsieur Poirot. Those letters accusing me. They're false, aren't they? Poirot's gaze was piercing. Monsieur Grayson, the attic letters were planted by Lady Clara to divert suspicion, but your business dealings were not without fault. Sir Reginald's journal confirms your misconduct, though not murder. You must face your own reckoning. Dr. Ward spoke, her tone calm, but edged. My laboratory was exploited, Monsieur Poirot. I bear no guilt, but I'll ensure tighter security. In the future, Poirot nodded. Dr. Ward, your expertise was misused, but your openness has cleared you. Be vigilant, for knowledge is a double-edged sword. The room fell silent, the weight of Poirot's words settling over them. The storm's fading wail signaled the approach of dawn, and with it the promise of rescue. Poirot moved to the window, pushing aside the heavy curtains to reveal the first rays of sunlight glinting off the snow. The drifts were still high, but a faint path was visible, suggesting the roads would soon be cleared. He turned back to the group, his voice resolute. The police will arrive soon. Summoned by the telephone line restored at first light. Lady Clara and Monsieur Collins will face justice. The rest of you must rebuild, learn from this tragedy. Greed and betrayal brought this house to ruin, but truth has set it free. Lady Clara rose, her movement slow, as if the weight of her crimes anchored her. You're a cruel man, Poirot, she whispered. You've stripped me of everything. No, Madame, Poirot replied, his voice unwavering. You stripped yourself when you chose murder over honor. Collins escorted her to her room, under Poirot's instructions to keep her confined until the authorities arrived. The others dispersed, their footsteps heavy, their faces reflecting the toll of the night. Elise lingered, approaching Poirot, her eyes glistening. Thank you, monsieur, you've given me a chance to start again. Poirot's smile was kind. Mademoiselle, you have the strength within you. Use it wisely. As the manor emptied, Poirot remained in the drawing room, his hands clasped behind his back, his mind reflecting on the case. The stopped watch, set to 11:07 to create a false timeline, had been Lady Clara's attempt to secure her alibi, claiming she was in her room. The potassium cyanate, stolen from Dr. Ward's unsecured conservatory, was her weapon, administered through the brandy Collins poured. The threatening notes, forged in her private stationery, were a distraction, designed to suggest an external enemy. The attic letters framing Grayson were her misdirection, exploiting his real but lesser crimes. The coded message, "Beware the trusted," was Sir Reginald's warning, suspecting his wife's ambition. The attempt on Elise, a desperate act to eliminate the true heir, was the killer's mistake, revealing Lady Clara's fear of losing control. Poirot's trap, announcing he would name the killer and planting forged letters, had forced her hand, provoking the attack on Elise and Colin's confession. Every clue from the ink smudge on the blotter to the vase hiding the toxin vial had led to this moment. His little gray cells had triumphed, unraveling a tapestry of deception woven with greed and betrayal. The sound of engines rumbled faintly, outside signaling the arrival of the police. Poirot moved to the entrance hall where the heavy oak door was flung open, admitting a gust of cold air and a group of officers, their faces stern. He greeted them with a nod, providing a concise summary of the case, handing over the evidence: letters, vials, the watch, the forged notes. Lady Clara and Collins were led away, the former silent, the latter bowing his head in shame. As the police departed, Poirot stepped onto the gravel drive, the snow crunching under his patent leather shoes. The dawn sky was clear, a pale blue, stretching over the Yorkshire moors, a stark contrast to the darkness of the past 24 hours. Elise emerged, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes meeting his. "Will you stay, Monsieur Poirot?" she asked softly. "Non, mademoiselle," he replied, his voice gentle. "My work here is done. Ravenwood is yours now, to heal and rebuild." He tipped his hat, a small, elegant gesture, and boarded the waiting car, its engine idling. As it pulled away, Poirot glanced back at the manor, its Gothic silhouette softened by the morning light. The case of Ravenwood Manor was closed, a triumph of reason over deceit, but Poirot knew the world held countless more mysteries, waiting for his little gray cells to unravel. Chapter 15. Shadows of Legacy. The pale light of a late winter morning filtered through the frost-etched windows of Ravenwood Manor, casting delicate patterns across the oak-paneled walls of the study. It had been 7 days since Hercule Poirot unmasked Lady Clara Langston as the murderer of her husband, Sir Reginald, and the manor, though freed from the storm that had trapped its inhabitants, seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with the weight of recent revelations, and the household moved cautiously, as if the very walls might whisper secrets yet untold. Elise Langston, now the rightful heir, stood at the center of the study, her slender frame dwarfed by the towering bookshelves that lined the room. Her paint-stained fingers traced the edge of Sir Reginald's mahogany desk, her hazel eyes clouded with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. The manor was hers now, a legacy both cherished and burdensome, and she was resolute to restore its honor. Poirot, his small, meticulous figure framed by the doorway, observed her quietly. His patent leather shoes gleamed faintly in the morning light, and his mustache, as always, was impeccably trimmed. He had intended to depart Yorkshire that morning, his case concluded, but a restless curiosity, a prickle at the edge of his little gray cells, had kept him lingering. The manor, he sensed, had not yet yielded all its truths. "Mademoiselle Elise," he said, his voice soft but carrying the familiar Belgian cadence, "you are troubled, no? The weight of Ravenwood, it rests heavily upon you." Elise turned, her lips parting in a faint smile. "Monsieur Poirot, you see too much. I'm trying to make sense of it all. Father's death, mother's betrayal, and now this place. It's mine, but it feels haunted. Not by ghosts, but by secrets." She gestured to the desk where a stack of papers lay scattered, remnants of Sir Reginald's meticulous records. "I found something this morning. I don't know what to make of it." Poirot's eyes sharpened, and he stepped forward, his movements precise. "Show me, mademoiselle. Hercule Poirot is never one to dismiss a discovery, however small." Elise hesitated, then reached into a drawer, producing a small, leather-bound journal. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded, but legible. She opened it to a marked page, revealing a single entry in Sir Reginald's tight, angular script. March 12th, 1903. The shadow lingers. Father spoke of the debt unpaid, a sin buried beneath stone. The locket holds the key, but trust is a fragile thing. Beware the one who watches from afar. Poirot's brow furrowed as he read, his fingers brushing the page. Curieux, he murmured. A debt, a sin, a locket. And this date, 22 years before Sir Reginald's death. This speaks of his father, perhaps, and a secret long buried. He looked up, his gaze piercing. Mademoiselle, where did you find this? In a hidden compartment, Elise replied, pointing to a panel beneath the desk's surface. I was organizing Father's things and it sprang open when I pressed a loose board. There was something else, too. She reached into her pocket and produced a small, tarnished silver locket, its surface engraved with the Langston crest, a raven clutching a rose. She clicked it open, revealing a miniature portrait of a woman with dark hair and striking blue eyes, her expression somber. I don't know who she is. She's not Mother nor any family I recognize. Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. He took the locket, turning it in his gloved hands. This is no mere trinket, mademoiselle. A portrait so carefully hidden suggests significance, and this note, the one who watches from afar. It is a warning, perhaps, of an enemy yet unknown. He paused, his mind racing. Have you noticed anything else unusual since the storm? Elise hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. Last night I saw a light flickering in the west wing. It's been closed off for years, but it was unmistakable. A candle, maybe, moving past the windows. I've heard whispers in the corridors too faint to make out. The staff say it's just the wind, but I'm not so sure. Poirot's mustache twitched. The wind. It does not whisper words. Mademoiselle. This manor, it seems, has more to confess. Hercule Poirot will not leave until these shadows are brought to light. He slipped the locket into his pocket, his decision made. We must investigate. The West Wing, the journal, the locket. These are pieces of a puzzle. And Hercule Poirot, he never leaves a puzzle unsolved. The morning passed in a flurry of activity. Poirot summoned the remaining household members to the drawing room, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. Rupert Langston, still grappling with his mother's disgrace, slouched in a chair, his face pale but sober. Dr. Evelyn Ward, her auburn hair pulled back tightly, stood by the window, her green eyes watchful. Harold Grayson, his wiry frame tense, paced near the fireplace, his business misconduct still a raw wound. The staff, Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, and young Tom, the footman, stood nervously by the door, their loyalty to the Langstons, shaken but intact. Mes amis, Poirot began, his voice cutting through the tension. Ravenwood Manor holds a secret older than the tragedy we have just resolved. A journal entry from Sir Reginald speaks of a debt, a sin, and a locket. Last night Mademoiselle Elise saw a light in the West Wing, and whispers echo in these halls. These are not coincidences. Someone, or something, stirs the shadows of this house. I ask you now, have you seen or heard anything unusual? Mrs. Hargreaves, a stout woman with graying hair, spoke first, her voice trembling. Begging your pardon, sir, but the West Wing's been locked since Sir Reginald's father passed. No one goes there. If there was a light, it's, unnatural. Tom, barely 18, shifted uncomfortably. I heard footsteps 2 nights ago, sir, near the old gallery. Thought it was Mr. Rupert, but he was in the library. I didn't dare check. Rupert's head snapped up. Don't drag me into this, boy. I've enough troubles without being accused of skulking about. His voice was sharp, but his eyes darted nervously. Dr. Ward's tone was measured. Monsieur Poirot, I've noticed nothing out of the ordinary, but I've been preoccupied with securing my laboratory. After Clara's misuse of my chemicals, I've doubled the locks. Grayson stopped pacing, his voice low. I saw nothing, Poirot, but I'll admit this place feels wrong. Like it's watching us. If there's someone sneaking about, it's not me. Poirot's gaze swept the room, his little gray cells cataloging every expression, every hesitation, "Very well," he said. "We begin with the West Wing. Mademoiselle Elise, you will accompany me. The rest of you remain vigilant. If you see or hear anything, you will report to Poirot at once." The West Wing of Ravenwood Manor was a labyrinth of dust and shadows, its corridors lined with faded tapestries and portraits of long-dead Langstons. Elise led Poirot through a heavy oak door, its hinges groaning as it opened. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and thyme. Poirot's torch cast a narrow beam, illuminating cobwebs and cracked floorboards. "This wing," Elise said softly, "was my grandfather's domain. Father sealed it after his death, said it was too painful to maintain." Poirot's eyes scanned the walls, noting the faint outlines of doors long unused. "Painful, perhaps, but secrets do not fade with time. Show me where you saw the light." Elise pointed to a tall, arched window at the end of the corridor, its glass clouded with grime. "There last night. It moved, like someone was carrying a candle." Poirot approached, his torch revealing fresh scratches on the window's latch, as if it had been recently opened. He knelt, examining the floor, and found a faint smear of wax, still soft. "Curieux," he murmured. "Someone was here, and not long ago." They moved deeper into the wing, entering a cavernous room that must have been a private study. Shelves sagged under the weight of moldering books, and a massive desk stood against one wall, its surface littered with papers yellowed by age. Poirot's fingers danced over the desk, pausing at a small ornate box. He opened it, revealing a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The topmost letter bore a single line: "The debt must be paid or the raven will fall." "Mademoiselle," Poirot said, his voice low, "this is no ghost. Someone seeks to unsettle Ravenwood, perhaps to claim what they believe is theirs." He tucked the letters into his coat, his mind racing. The journal, the locket, the light, the letters, all pointed to a conspiracy older than Elise, older even than Sir Reginald. As they returned to the main house, a scream shattered the silence. Elise and Poirot hurried to the entrance hall where Mrs. Hargreaves stood trembling, pointing to a wall. A crude drawing of a raven, its wings spread, had been scrawled in charcoal with the words, "The debt lives," beneath it. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This is a message, mademoiselle. Someone wishes us to know they are watching." The day wore on, with Poirot questioning the staff and examining the manor's grounds. He found footprints in the snow near the west wing, leading to a rusted gate that opened onto the moors. The tracks were fresh, suggesting someone had come and gone under cover of darkness. Back in the study, he pored over the letters, each one cryptic, referencing a debt and a watcher. One mentioned a crypt beneath the manor, a place not even Elise knew existed. That evening, Poirot gathered the household again. "Amos," he said, "the mystery deepens. These letters, found in the West Wing, speak of a debt tied to the Langston family, perhaps from Sir Reginald's father's time. The locket, the journal, the signs, they suggest an outsider with a claim to Ravenwood. We must find this crypt, for it holds the key." Rupert scoffed. "A crypt? This is non." Chapter 16. The Crypt's Whisper. The dawnlight crept over the Yorkshire moors, painting the frost-covered grounds of Ravenwood Manor in hues of gold and grey. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and pine, a stark contrast to the stifling tension that still lingered within the manor's stone walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the gravel drive, his patent leather shoes sinking slightly into the softening snow, his sharp eyes scanning the horizon. The events of the previous day, the discovery of the crypt, the near-fatal cave-in, and the unmasking of Thomas Vaughan as the shadowy watcher, had left the household shaken, but not at rest. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with the certainty that the manor's secrets were not fully unraveled. The documents from the crypt, now safely tucked in his valise, hinted at a deeper conspiracy, one that stretched beyond Vaughan's personal vendetta. Elise Langston emerged from the manor, her shawl wrapped tightly against the morning chill, her hazel eyes reflecting both exhaustion and resolve. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice steady despite the strain of recent days. "You're still here. I thought you'd be halfway to London by now." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile softening his features. "Mademoiselle Elise, Hercule Poirot does not depart when the puzzle remains incomplete. The crypt, the documents, the sabotage, these are threads of a tapestry not yet fully woven. We must return to the crypt, for it whispers truths we have not yet heard." Dr. Evelyn Ward joined them, her auburn hair neatly pinned, her green eyes sharp despite the sleepless night. "I've reviewed the documents we retrieved," she said, her tone clinical but edged with unease. "They confirm Lord Edmund's debt to Charles Varnum, but there's a reference to a second promise and something about a relic hidden in the crypt. It's vague, but it suggests more than just land was at stake." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A relic, you say? Curieux. This changes the picture. We must investigate this crypt further, but with caution. The cave-in was no accident, and the one who caused it may still be near." He turned to Elise. "Mademoiselle, gather the household. We must ensure no one interferes with our descent." The drawing room was a somber assembly of the manor's remaining occupants. Rupert Langston, his face haggard but sober, sat stiffly, his hands clenched as if bracing for another blow. Harold Grayson, his wiry frame restless, avoided Poirot's gaze, his guilt over past business dealings still raw. Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper, stood by the door, her gray hair pulled tightly back, her eyes darting nervously. Tom, the young footman, hovered near her, his youthful face pale with fear, the weight of the previous night's revelations. Thomas Vaughan's arrest and the discovery of the Langston family's broken promise hung over them like a storm cloud. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice cutting through the silence. "The crypt beneath Ravenwood holds more than the memory of Lord Edmund's debt. There is mention of a relic, a second promise, and the sabotage yesterday suggests someone wishes to keep it hidden. Today we return to the crypt, Mademoiselle Elise, Dr. Ward, and I. The rest of you will remain here under watch. If anyone attempts to leave or interfere, Hercule Poirot will know." Rupert's eyes flashed. "You think one of us caused that cave-in? I was in my room, Poirot, drowning my sorrows, not playing saboteur." Grayson's voice was sharp. "And I've no interest in crypts or relics, I just want to leave this cursed place." Mrs. Hargreaves wrung her hands. "Sir, the crypt's a bad place. My mother worked here when Lord Edmund died. She said it was cursed, sealed for a reason." Tom nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I heard stories, sir. Things down there. They don't stay quiet." Poirot's gaze was unyielding. "Curses, non. Human greed and fear. These are the true specters. We go now, and we will uncover the truth." He gestured to Elise and Dr. Ward, and the trio set out for the cellar, their footsteps echoing in the silent manor. The cellar's iron grate, now cleared of debris from the previous day's collapse, revealed the narrow staircase descending into the crypt. Poirot's torch cast a steady beam, illuminating the damp stone walls, their surfaces etched with faint carvings of ravens and roses. The Langston crest. The air grew colder as they descended, the scent of earth and decay thickening. Elise clutched her shawl, her breath visible in the chill, while Dr. Ward's expression remained composed, though her fingers tightened around the documents she carried. The crypt was as they had left it, save for the scattered stones from the cave-in. The sarcophagus of Lord Edmund stood resolute, its lid undisturbed, but the locked chest beside it drew Poirot's attention. He knelt, examining the lock, which still bore the key they had used yesterday. "The relic," he murmured. "It must be here or nearby. Dr. Ward, what do the documents say of this second promise?" Dr. Ward opened the folder, her voice low. "It's cryptic, monsieur. One page mentions a raven's heart, a relic entrusted to Lord Edmund by Charles Varnum, meant to seal their bond. It was to be returned if the land deal failed, but it never was. The text suggests it's hidden where the raven rests." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The raven rests, here, in the crypt, where Lord Edmund lies." He approached the sarcophagus, his gloved hands tracing its edges. A faint seam, barely visible, ran along the base. "Mademoiselle Elise, assist me. We must move." The lid. With effort, they slid the heavy stone aside, revealing a hollow compartment beneath. Inside lay a small, intricately carved box, its surface inlaid with obsidian and silver, depicting a raven clutching a ruby-red stone. Poirot lifted it carefully, his fingers steady. "The raven's heart," he said. "This is no mere relic. It is valuable, perhaps priceless." Elise's eyes widened. "What is it, monsieur?" Poirot opened the box, revealing a heart-shaped ruby, its facets catching the torchlight in a blaze of crimson. "A gem," he said, "but more. A symbol, perhaps, of the trust between Edmund and Varnum. Its loss would have been a grave betrayal." He paused, his mind racing. "This is what the saboteur seeks, not just land, but this treasure." A sudden clang echoed from the staircase. Poirot's head snapped up, his torch sweeping the darkness. "Someone is here," he whispered. "Stay close." They moved toward the sound, finding the stone door ajar. Footprints, fresh in the dust, led deeper into the crypt's uncharted tunnels. Poirot's voice was low but firm. "We are not alone. Follow, but with caution." The tunnels twisted beneath the manor, their walls damp and lined with ancient roots. The air grew heavier, the silence broken only by the drip of water and their muffled steps. Poirot's torch revealed a fork in the path, one leading to a dead end, the other descending further. A faint scrape like metal on stone came from the deeper tunnel. "They are ahead," Poirot said. "We must be swift." As they rounded a corner, a figure loomed. A man, his face obscured by a scarf, his hands clutching a pickaxe. He froze, then swung, aiming for the tunnel's support beam. Poirot shouted, "Arrêtez!" But the man struck, and a low rumble shook the walls. Dust and stones fell, blocking their path back. The man darted into the darkness, his footsteps fading. "We are trapped," Dr. Ward said, her voice steady, but tight. That beam was deliberate. Poirot's eyes narrowed. But we are not helpless. The crypt has secrets, but so does Hercule Poirot." He examined the fallen stones, noting their arrangement. "This was planned, but not perfectly. There is a way out. There must be." He turned to the ruby, still in its box. "This is their goal. They know we have it." Elise's voice trembled. "Who, monsieur? Vaughan is in custody." "Not Vaughan," Poirot said. "Someone else. Someone within our circle who knew of the crypt and the relic. We must find them before they escape with their prize." They pressed forward, the tunnel narrowing until it opened into a smaller chamber, its walls lined with ancient urns. At its center stood a rusted iron gate, leading to an unknown exit. Poirot's torch caught a glint. Another key, identical to the one from the crypt, lying on the floor. "They dropped this in their haste," he said, picking it up. "This gate leads to the moors, I suspect. Our saboteur seeks to flee." Using the key, they unlocked the gate, emerging into a hidden alcove on the manor's grounds, concealed by overgrown ivy. The moors stretched before them, the morning mist curling over the hills. Footprints led toward the village, fresh and hurried. "They are close," Poirot said. We returned to the manor. The household must be questioned. Back in the drawing room, the atmosphere was electric with fear. Rupert stood, his face pale. "You're back. Thank God." Tom said he heard noises from the cellar. Grayson's eyes darted. "I told you, Poirot, I've no part in this. I was here all morning." Mrs. Hargreaves clutched her apron. "The crypt, sir. It's cursed. I warned you." Tom, trembling, spoke up. "I saw someone, sir, near the cellar door at dawn. A man, not Mr. Vaughan. He had a limp like he was hurt." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A limp, you say? Most interesting. And you, Monsieur Rupert, where were you at dawn?" Rupert bristled. "In my room, Poirot. You can't pin this on me." Poirot's gaze shifted to Grayson. "And you, monsieur? You have been eager to leave. Perhaps you know more of this relic than you claim." Grayson's face reddened. I told you I know nothing of crypts or rubies. I'm no thief, Dr. Ward interjected, her voice calm. Monsieur Poirot, the documents mention a man named Henry Varnum, Charles's brother. He was never accounted for after the land deal failed. Could he or his descendant be involved? Poirot nodded. Possible, Doctor. But the saboteur is here among us.